January, blah, 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 blah. Opening meeting for January something or other.
Open the meeting for, what is today?
January 22nd.
January 22nd,
Yes.
7 PM. This is Finance Committee. Thank you all for showing up. Let's see what we have on the agenda. We will do our, look at the dates that we have scheduled for the budget process. We'll get our assignments done for all of the department reviews for the budget. We'll look at the draft memo of the school department for their budget review. We have the appropriation balances from FY19, a review of our town report. The fire study we requested, but that is not yet available, so we won't have the opportunity to take a look at that. We'll look at meeting minutes, bills. We'll take a look at our financial and debt policies. Look at the role of the Finance Committee and the language that is in our charter and anything that might relate to that. And then we're going to go through a quick review of the budget process. And in that review, I'd like to have some discussion about what we think we need as a committee this year to be successful in an override year. So we'll talk about that. Some other member topics, CIPC. Colleen and I had a meeting with the Select Board in December, so we'll talk about what came out of that. There's not much to mention about the CIPC bylaw committee, but other than it needs to meet. So maybe we can set a date on that. We have an update on the Shared Services Committee, so Sue and I had some discussion with the administration on that. Updates on DPW and EDC, and then the Library Planning and Building Committee, and then discussion of the School Committee and Select Board meeting. So that is that. Let's start with the review of the schedule. So our next meeting is Tim's presentation to us. That's going to be on the 12th. Becca said that she thought we would be able to get that budget file in advance. So they're trying to get that for the meeting on the 4th with the Select Board. And if they do that, then we'll get the file at that point. If not, she said the latest we would get it would be the 10th. So we'll have a couple of days to actually look at the budget before Tim presents it.
Yeah, don't we usually have that preliminary budget with pretty good detail for when we go chat with the various department heads?
Yeah, so that will all be before our meetings with all, that's sort of the signal for us to start meeting with the
Yeah,
department.
that'll be a month before the March 9th.
Yeah.
Okay.
March, what did we decide on, March 21st?
March 21st. Yep.
So we have some high-level preliminary numbers from Tim. There's really not a lot of detail, so I'm not sure there's much to go over at that point. But I'll be asking to get that file as quickly as we can, but the latest that we'll get it is a couple of days before the meeting. So we shouldn't be showing up to Tim's first full budget presentation without a file, which is good, so.
He should be presenting to the selectmen, so we could watch that as well, or go to the meeting.
He should, yep.
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 Well, you know, the other night, he presented a budget in a joint meeting that we had here. Was that last week? Before last?
Tuesday, yep.
And he talked about a, you know, potential override of 6.5 and a deficit of some 800,000. Where did that come from? I mean, the budget wasn't done? I was very confused. I wanted to ask, but I felt rushed.
It's a
Yeah.
it's a shortfall, Mark. It's a shortfall.
I'm sorry. Shortfall.
Well, I think.
So I'm a little confused.
Well, so his budget isn't done yet. So, for example, they haven't gotten their insurance numbers back. So he doesn't have all the numbers yet that he needs to feed into
Oh,
the
so that
final
was an
budget.
estimate that he was
It was an
presenting?
estimate.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, all right.
So I think for both that discussion and also he had to have some basis for the number that he gave Jay to put together Jay's side of the budget. And that was based on those preliminaries.
Okay.
So,
Okay, that clears it up. Thank you.
so then we have our department review meetings. So we've got the March 21st. Sue, did we have something, the individual departments listed?
Yeah, it's on the third page. And
She hasn't set up the.
Last year's
department
membership
for that
has.
day. You haven't set the department days up yet. Or days the departments, that doesn't come.
So
until
just the
later.
ones that have been confirmed are in there, okay, got it, all right. So we have March 21st, Wednesday, the 25th, Saturday, the 28th. We have April dates of Wednesday, the 1st, Saturday, the 4th, April, the 21st,
Mhm.
which is Tuesday, Wednesday, the 22nd, Thursday, the 23rd.
Oh.
Monday, the 27th, and Tuesday, April 28th. So all the meetings in March, up until April 4th, are department reviews. April 21st, we'll start into the town meeting preparation with warrant reviews, 21st, 22nd, 23rd. Of course, we don't always need all of those meetings, so hopefully we won't, but if we do, we have them on the schedule.
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
Why is the April 1st for the school department tentative?
That is a
Okay.
great question. We might move that ahead a little bit. That's where it is right now. We haven't confirmed a date with them. That's a little bit late in the schedule. So it's likely that we'll move that forward. So we could pick an alternate date for that now. I think we could probably move that. Some of it just depends on the budget process.
Have you had a discussion with Laura and Becca as to when we're gonna meet jointly again,
No,
the three of us?
I haven't. No.
Okay. Because I imagine if we're gonna be talking to override, a lot of the budget will be discussed, except that the 5.9 is based on an override, I understand.
Right.
And so the budget they were presenting to us will have a lot lesser number. So,
Yep, they're gonna have to rework that. So we'll talk about that in the budget process, because I want to talk through those scenarios and,
okay.
yeah,
Okay.
and how Finance Committee gets comfortable with both an override scenario and an override scenario, because they're both possibilities. So any questions on this, on these dates? Okay.
Mr. Chair, what should we do about the school committee? Should we, is it on hold
What's that?
for his memo?
So that has to go out next week, yeah?
Yeah, I don't want to put a rush on it, but I'd like to give him a date.
Yeah. So, yeah, all right. So later on in the packet is the draft memo. Which would be for April 1st at this point.
So we could move it back to the 18th of March, or we could move it, or off, like we say, the 11th of March, the 18th of March. Because right now he's scheduled for April 1st.
Right.
And I know that it does stem on a lot of further discussions. That's, what is the pleasure of the board?
I think because of potential cuts and overrides and everything else and the impact to the school budget, I'd rather talk to him later
That's
in
I
the
agree.
process.
There's
Until
gonna be
we
a lot
know-
of moving parts.
Exactly,
After other department heads?
yeah.
Yeah, I don't, it's not like they're, yeah, I would.
Okay.
Just my
I think it
opinion.
makes sense to talk to him later in the process, because whatever cuts happen, I think, if we have to make cuts, his budget's gonna get affected a lot.
Yeah.
So I wanna give him more time to prepare
Gonna
for it.
move-
So you're looking after it?
So that gets
After
him,
April first, I leave it at April
Keeping the
first.
April 1st.
Yeah, I'm saying
Yeah.
keep it on April
I-
first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
so that gives him time to, more time to prepare, I guess, but I guess I just want to also think about the commentary from last Tuesday's meeting, which is that they have to do layoffs. and they have to announce those, and, so,
Well, he said mid-April, right?
yeah. So I don't know if that factors into this decision, but,
Well, because there's nothing we do that changes his budget.
right?
Well, we can make a recommendation to town meeting that,
Right, but I'm just saying,
Different than what the town
his budget
administrator
isn't
does.
gonna change, and his decision on what to send out to teachers is not gonna change based on meeting with us.
oh, I see what you're saying, you're right.
I think,
It might actually be better for him if he talks to us later, because
I think so, and as far
I
as
agree, that's what I'm saying.
After the
worrying
first.
about,
as kind of close to that mid-April timeframe as possible, so that if he's projecting cuts, which in an override scenario, that's a real possibility, he's not having to tip his hand too early, I guess.
Correct, I understand.
well, and I guess that you can also look at it this way too, the teachers are going to get pink slipped, one way or the other, either because this budget is not going to be able to keep them all.
Yep.
And someone's gonna have to be laid off at the amount that Tim is suggesting, or if there's an override and that doesn't fail, then there's still that scenario, of people being laid off. So I mean, there isn't any good time
Hmm.
to discuss when we wanna do this, because it's bad either way.
Yep.
If they tried to schedule a special election, would that change your mind when you wanted to meet with them?
Yeah,
We would have to, but
Yeah, and I think I'd like to hear more, you said you wanted to talk, you said you want to talk about the next, you asked when the next joint meeting was gonna be, and you said you wanted to talk about that process. Let's, when we talk about that, then that will probably lead to what we're gonna decide. Because there doesn't seem to be any urgency.
right.
But I'm interested to hear what you have to say on that, because I know you've been talking to people.
and that's,
You've been doing a lot of talking. Is that why your voice is so soft
I
tonight?
have been talking a lot.
and that kind of bothers me, there isn't any urgency.
Well, yeah, the idea of doing it on the presidential primary came up, and everybody kind of agreed that there wasn't enough time. And so now we're gonna do it later, but when are we gonna start doing it? We're gonna end up in a position where we've waited so long that there's again not enough time.
Sure,
Well, the three committees have got to come together
we do.
soon. They should have probably said something for this week or next week.
So let's table this discussion for right now, but we'll get back to it. I agree, we want to try to put some urgency on this. There's a lot of work that we have to do. I tried to convey some of that in our TRICOM meeting, but we sort of ran out of time for that discussion, so, but I have been having some discussions with members of the select board and also school committee to try to see if, what we can do to move things along, to help all of the budget holders kind of get through their process. So we'll talk about that. So let's send that memo out to Jay. We'll just leave that as April 1st for now. And if, things change like a special election, or if something happens that would alter the time frame, we can always reschedule.
Right.
So let's get our schedule set for now. The next thing that we have is the department review assignments.
I'd like to keep the ones that I have, the treasurer, the school department, the accountant, town clerk,
you're taking all the good ones.
and the town administrator. Yes, I am.
If I'm allowed, can I just piggyback on Mark and watch what he does when he does those meetings?
And then do the opposite.
Okay, so Mark, you're doing treasurer,
All right, so we got,
Yeah, I treasurer, the town clerk, the accountant, the school department, and the town administrator.
okay, so.
And
hold on
I'd
for a
like to
second, I've
keep
gotta catch up.
Mine,
all right, so
Town
Sue wants to
clerk.
keep hers.
mine are council on aging, police department. Dan, you want to stick with me?
Can I sit with you on the police? Sue, I haven't done them.
Yeah, but everybody sat with me last year on the police. I don't know how many people were there.
Well,
He's such a great guy.
He is, I like Norm.
Yeah.
if everybody's holding on to theirs, that kind of just, I guess I don't really have a choice but to stick around with you.
Planning board, I will continue with that. What else did I have? I had the fire department.
Okay, so I'll do library and economic development since those are the committees I'm on.
Okay.
I mean, I kinda get off easy, I guess, but. I do also have, obviously scheduling difficulties
Oh,
since
I
I
think
work
I had
full-time.
DPW too last year. Dan, you and I did
2 years ago, yeah, we
DPW.
did DPW.
Are you
Oh,
doing
Dan
sewer?
and I did it too, I think.
I'm sorry, what?
Are you keeping sewer and conservation?
Oh, did I do sewer last time? Okay, yeah.
I'll take DPW and
Oh, I
everything
know
else
what
that goes
happened. I
with it,
think
so.
someone ended up doing that for me because that was when my mother passed away.
Dan and I'll stick with DPW.
All right.
Irene, when you meet with the sewer,
Yep,
ask them if they think there is any reason to come out of being an enterprise account
okay,
and move into the general fund.
okay.
Say that again, Barry, if there's any reason for
Right
what.
now, they're an enterprise account,
Yeah,
which means they've agreed
yep,
that they're not taking any tax money. They are only going on user fees.
yes.
Is there any thought that they would want to or think about changing that?
I don't think they would.
Why
I think
would
they use
they-
their free cash.
They would not. But there's a pot of money that comes in that goes into their account, pays all their bills, pays their salaries, everything else.
Right.
If they go into the general fund, that pot of money can be manipulated by whoever controls the general fund.
I would fight to my last breath to leave that as an enterprise fund.
I was thinking the same thing, to be honest.
They have to keep it.
Yeah,
what's the
what's-
thought
What I'm
process?
thinking is they have a surplus every year, they take in more revenue, and they have their
That's their
own,
yes.
they have their own excess and deficiency fund. It's probably, I don't know, last time I checked, it was about $500,000.
They
They
Yeah,
have
but
their
they're
free
they're
cash.
adjusting their user fees.
I understand that, but what Barry's saying is there could be a move that if you make it a town department, that
Right.
$500,000 goes into the general fund
Right.
and can be spent anywhere.
No.
And there was a reason to make it
You
an
leave them as an
fund.
enterprise fund. You want water, sewer.
Right.
Well, our water departments are districts, but you want sewer to stay as an enterprise.
And they have their free cash.
Yeah, they have their own excess and deficiency
Right,
fund, absolutely.
right. That's
and
their free
To be
cash.
used to fix the plant and the
Right,
pipes
and they
and all
usually
that
do
stuff.
that.
Right, they're not generating a profit,
No.
it's going toward
You would take it.
They
sustaining
usually put it through their projects.
sewer department.
Yeah.
They do.
That's interesting that you brought that up. Are you hearing things?
Yeah.
Oh, he hears.
Oh, he is things.
He's got it in the
shy
sewer
Put it this way.
department.
I will ask, I'll ask the
From my
question.
corporate experience and from other experiences, there's always someone who is looking at taking advantage of a revenue stream that might be owned by somebody else. You must have run into these
You're
things.
absolutely right.
I
Especially
think
when
right
there's a-
now they're being kind of smart in not having a separate sewer head, whatever, sewer superintendent. It's actually one person who is doing two jobs,
Oh, that makes sense.
whether it's,
And the sewer's paying their fair share of that cost.
yes.
They are.
Makes sense.
So,
We used to have a sewer and then a DPW,
Just become the
Yeah.
city commissioner.
2 people,
yep.
so, not anymore. Anyway,
I'm
All right.
I'm just thinking of, are there ways that we could squeeze money out of something? Maybe they could raise their sewer rates just a bit to cover something else.
I think they
Oh,
did.
The ratepayers,
They
the
did, but
ratepayers
they're
would
dead.
flip out.
Yeah, they've
if-
gone
if
way up.
all
I
of a
don't know
sudden-
They've gone
Sorry.
way up
All
because
All of a
of
sudden,
their
as,
debt.
as a sewer
Because of
ratepayer,
their debt.
It's gone way up.
yeah,
Yeah.
and as a sewer ratepayer, if that number's being manipulated to fund other aspects of the town budget, I'm gonna be,
Yeah, no, because
Set.
that's
Yeah, and-
based on my usage for
and
the sewer,
moving
not for
on.
anything else.
Well, and I also
Thank you for
think
getting
it's,
everybody rabble roused.
I know.
Good job,
You
Barry.
just
I'm
stirred
on
up a heart
septic,
I think
so
the-
I can't work.
the timing is great with the policies that we just received, because I forget exactly what the wording was, but I think it was the financial management one, or fiscal management, whatever it was, said that we would try to keep the user fees to only cover the cost of the service being provided, and
That's an
so,
enterprise.
right.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah,
That's why
so
I
the
went
idea,
with enterprise.
the idea of charging more to try to increase revenue for the general fund is against that policy, and also something I personally don't want to do.
I like like the
Yeah, and the
idea that
reason the
there
fees
maybe
went up
is
so much is
cash that
'cause of
could be
the
used in
plant.
other
Put that
places.
into a department, then the town's gonna have to cover all
Besides
that debt.
volunteering out of being an enterprise, that can't just be taken away from them, right?
No,
Town meeting would have to vote to pull it out.
That would be a big structural change.
It's a huge structural change, and town meeting would have to act
and just
on it.
look at the debt we'd have to carry.
Well, yeah, because the sewer debt right now is being paid for by the sewer ratepayers.
That's right.
And then that comes in the, but they're raising the money to pay that, so why are we talking about this?
Why are you doing this, Barry, getting us all upset?
All right, moving on.
Actually, I think I know why he's doing it.
So,
But, hang on a sec.
All right,
So, so you got Council on Aging.
See if I
Yep, I
can find
got
another
Council on Aging.
department I can.
Barry, do you have the assessor?
The assessor, yes, Mary Oliver, she is so cool. I like meeting with her.
She was great the other night. I
Yes.
like Mary.
She
Barry,
is.
do you have recreation?
Recreation is so cool, I'm telling you. They generate a profit.
Yes, they
yep,
do.
they do.
Now, that goes into the general fund.
Yes, it
Yep.
does. Legitimately so.
So Sue, you and Dan are doing police?
Yes, and DPW.
All right, so
I thought
I'm
rec
gonna do a ride
did
along,
not
please.
generate a profit. I thought
He's
they,
riding along.
I thought Jen
Let me
said
pick
they
you up, I'll
could
put
if
you in
we
the
put
back.
more investment into them.
I'll get you arrested, then you can meet with us.
Great, thank you.
Um,
Just what I need.
Ooh,
Get the
fundraiser.
management reports. And actually, the management report we get doesn't show revenue. You have to go to another report.
Okay, let's see, so we
next.
have the first page covered. Barry, you had a bunch with Bob Berger. Still on board for that?
Okay, so I got Berger,
Oh, God bless you.
Oliver. Oh, we get along just fine. I
Okay.
respect what he does.
I will stick
Cool
with
stuff.
Veteran Services, and Board of Health.
You're with
And
me
what
on the
about
fire
cable
department,
oversight?
Matt?
What's that?
You're gonna still go with me on the fire department? You
Yes.
went last year,
Yep.
okay. All right.
What about you skipped over cable oversight?
Cable oversight.
That had been Heather.
Oh, that's Heather. Do you wanna keep doing
Yeah,
it?
I'll try again with all mine. No one really talked to me except but I'll try. Everyone's on vacation. A lot of them are on, like, they're in Florida and they don't really want, or North Carolina, and they don't really care
Yeah.
to discuss
No, they don't.
their
You should
budgets.
be able to reach Jen.
Yeah, I try, trust me.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
So I'll try again.
Well, Berger, you could talk to Bob.
I will.
For big cable.
I will.
Although, a
I
tour
think I
was
wound
great.
up actually did talking to Bob last year.
Yep.
And I definitely talked to Skip, who then told me about South Grafton Community and farm, and the firehouse.
The tour was really great. Did anybody else go?
No,
To,
Barry and I went, and Matt.
to the cable.
Yeah,
that's fun.
Yeah.
That's good.
really
I
nicely
had seen
done.
it 2 weeks before I went to see
Yeah.
Barton. Beautiful. They
It
did a
is.
nice job in there.
When
Yeah.
this was
Oh,
on.
I missed it this past weekend, didn't I?
The only thing they didn't do was that classic angled window from the control room into the, and that's supposed to eliminate reflections on both sides.
Interesting.
I don't know.
All right, so I think we have all of our assignments covered. Sounds like everybody's sticking with what
Sounds
they
like it's
had with a
last
couple
year.
of ride-alongs. That's good.
Colleen, what are you doing?
I'm gonna go with Mark on all of his.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Didn't I have,
So please don't notify these folks just yet.
it's not,
Let me set up a schedule with them as I normally do. And normally, they haven't received their budget yet either. So
No.
this would be an after February 12th
Yep.
timeframe.
Yep.
Okay? But I'll send everything to you as soon as.
Yep.
you know, get it set up for you.
Good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
question for Anita. Why is
We
she
can't
getting
contact them. We don't have a budget anyway.
That's right, there's no budget yet.
16,000, I think?
This is the earliest so far. This is great.
This is-
Yep,
is good.
it is.
and they're
Um,
looking
Alright.
to
Can I
close
ask
it
that everybody in their discussions with the budget
Check again.
holders,
what it was.
ask the question about capital?
I always do.
You know, did you attend the capital summit? Are you getting what you need? Is there anything that you've become aware of that isn't on the list, that's new, or, is this on your mind? Just all the kind of standard questions. I want to kind of get back to that a little bit as much as
Yeah,
we
I
can.
always ask.
Very good. All right, so we have our, the appropriation balances came out.
Yeah, so you emailed that to us, right?
I emailed. It is not in your packet.
No, yep, that's right.
Yep.
I remember seeing it.
Yeah,
Yep,
quick
we're saving
glance through
paper.
them.
I have questions. Some of them maybe should have come up when we first did the budget, but I got about halfway through it. Just quickly, on the moderator, I'm just curious why there's two categories, why there's a department head and why there's professional and technical?
For town moderator?
Yeah.
Usually it's expenses.
Yeah, well, it's called expenses, but it says, professional and technical. I'm just curious. I mean, the total, it's $300, like it matters. I was just wondering, and does he get 150 per meeting, or is it 75 per meeting and then 150s for something else?
It's a yearly salary.
Yeah,
He takes it, if he takes it, he's not been taking
yeah.
it.
Yeah, as of right now, it doesn't look like he is, because
professional
there
and
should be money
technical.
spent from
I'll ask the,
October, and
I'll
there's
ask the
not.
town administrator.
It
when we
just
meet with him.
usually,
He's on that, the town administrator is responsible
he
for that
doesn't
budget. We'll
collect it
ask
till
him.
the end of the year if he takes it.
Okay,
The
and again,
handheld-
it's just pure curiosity on my part.
The
It's more
handheld
just
device?
ours is-
Understood.
The handheld devices, professional and technical,
Ah, okay.
maintenance.
No.
Would that, would
Oh, I think it's more than that.
is that where that would come under, moderator?
No, he doesn't do anything with
Yeah,
that.
no, I don't think so.
David's been handling all that with Becca.
Right,
Ray's
but
not
what,
anywhere near
which
it.
account does it hit?
Let's not speculate, we'll ask.
Town meeting,
Yeah, let's find out.
he goes under,
Okay.
it might be under that, I don't know.
So anyway, my next
Find
question
out.
was, on selectmen, I'm just, again, this is curiosity, maybe I knew this at one time and I've forgotten. There's money for elected and appointed boards. Do the selectmen get $1,000 each? Is that what
Yes.
that is?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to check. Who's the department head?
The chair?
Is it Joanne?
Oh, I don't
Their
know.
secretary.
Oh, Cindy?
No, Cindy's
Oh, the new
Tibbs.
person they just hired.
Joanne
Okay,
is
so
the
The
department head for
the
the
secretary is considered the department head for the select board.
board, select board.
Probably in
yes.
that, in that
Yeah.
line item.
Okay.
And Cindy's the town administrator.
That's right.
Okay, and then it says, they have conference seminars and fees, and I know it's not a lot, but I'm gonna bring this up in a couple of different departments. It's over, not by much, but I'm curious, when they have the line item for conference seminars and fees, is it a set amount? And then
Probably budget
people
for the MMA
submit for
conference.
reimbursement? I'm
They
sorry,
probably budget for the MMA conference.
Yeah.
okay,
Or maybe a
So-
selectmen association meeting, similar
Right.
to what the school committee goes to their association
talking
meeting.
and
about
again, I'm
select board?
not overly, yeah, at this point I am, I'm not overly concerned what it is, so much as how do they budget for it? And is it a fixed amount so that you would say to an employee, look, we'll give you up to $300?
It's probably, to pay for the MMA is probably $180, I think it is to register, $195 to register for it. So you probably, whatever that is in the 5 selectmen, they may all wanna go, he's probably budgeting enough to send them.
Okay, because they budgeted
Right.
200, they spent 255.
Yep.
Again, not a huge amount over in this particular case. And again, my reason for asking is, are we doing a strictly whatever it costs we spend, and if it goes over, it goes over? Or do you have employees, because I can remember, when I was working at Assumption College, you would get a certain amount per year towards conferences, and if you wanted to spend more, you could, but that was it, that was all you got. Didn't matter how much your conference cost, you were only gonna get X dollars. And there was actually a limit per conference, so you couldn't take the entire amount to do one in Hawaii. They wanted to encourage you to go to more than one, yeah, I know. So if you wanted to go to Hawaii, great, but again, you could only apply a certain amount of your allowance, and then the rest you had to pay out of pocket.
Right.
So I just wanted to know if, and again, our conference fees for the most part aren't that high. In a couple of departments they are, but they're not, again, astronomical. I just wanted to know what process we used. Is it strictly whatever it costs we pay, or are we limiting people and asking them to pay some of it out of pocket? I'm curious.
I was always, for all the years I've been on, it's always been whatever they put into their budget for, because they usually know what conferences they're going to go
That's
to.
right.
Right.
And they stick to that amount. So why that went over, I don't know.
Okay. And again, it's not over much, maybe in some
Sometimes
of the
the
others
cost
it's over
goes up,
more.
so,
Sometimes the cost goes up.
yeah, it might be just that. It might just been,
Right.
the cost was higher than they had anticipated.
Okay.
Or they submit for travel, parking.
That's what I was thinking,
Food.
gas or food.
Yep.
Well, this one specifically says fees. So I'm
okay.
going to believe that the other one would have to come out of travel.
Well, if it's fees, then it means that their
Right.
dues went up for the membership dues.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I would assume that that would have to be a different category, the travel one. And then my other question was, why are there 2 dues categories? There's dues, comma, membership, comma, schooling, and then there's dues and memberships.
That you'd have to ask Anita.
Did you say schooling, Irene?
The second one doesn't.
The
So
first one,
the first one, which is
Are you still on the select
5715.
board?
Yeah, I'm still on select board. So the first account is 5715, going last four digits, dues, membership, schooling. And then the second account, which is 5730, is only dues and memberships.
the schooling is allowed for members of the town, employees of the town,
Yep,
if they want to improve on, their position,
yep,
or even take an Excel, class.
okay.
So they're, allowed so much per employee, and it has to be applied for.
Okay. But again, I was just curious why there's two separate categories.
Because the schooling is for all the employees, and the dues for other things is for,
That's specific
basically for the
department.
select board.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, okay. That answers that question. And I was just curious, in terms of their office supplies, do we know what they historically spend on office supplies?
Not really.
Only because they budgeted for 5,000, they've so far spent $239.
Yeah, I will tell you, he's probably, if I was doing it, I would wait until later in the year before I spent that money, just in case I
Okay.
have shortfalls in other areas.
That's kind of what I was thinking, that's
I
why
just
I
tell
was
Sue to stop
curious.
making copies,
Okay.
just saying.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought, that's a buffer account, maybe, okay. And then in the town administrator's budget, the annuity, is that,
Oh,
that's part of his contract, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That, just leave that alone.
yes,
Yep.
indeed.
Life insurance,
Part of his contract,
okay, so that's strictly 410,
yes.
okay. Is that only while he's employed by us?
Yes.
Okay, so if he was to leave, we would no longer be carrying the life insurance cost
Well,
for him.
Unless
unless
the
the
new
next
one
guy
had it.
gets it.
Right, but no, but not for
Woman,
him.
I'm sorry,
Right.
don't mean to.
It ends.
Okay, I just making sure, because I was curious about this. What are the professional and technical expenses under town administrator?
That is for him to attend conferences, that's for him to go if he takes a
Professional and
course.
technical?
Yes.
For professional,
Uh,
technical, he usually takes out for engineering work, things that are in the
Yeah.
town. If you ask him for a list, and we've done in the past, that would please give us an
Yeah.
itemized list of your professional, technical, and he has done that, but it's not always spent
Right.
exactly for those items.
Okay, because there's a separate line item of
Mhm.
4,500 for
Right.
conference, seminar, and fees, so that's
Right,
why I
no,
was like, whoa, wait a
professional,
minute, that
technical.
should not be in
Oh, okay, so
professional
I
and
confused the
technical.
two. Professional and technical is if he has
Yeah.
to hire an outside service.
Right, he for
To do an
surveying,
appraisal
it's a-
or
right,
whatever. Okay.
Right.
Okay, I was just curious,
My fault,
again,
sorry.
that's an awful lot of money, I'm curious what it's for, and so
Usually
far
that's
we
where
haven't
he
spent
takes
very
the
much.
money out of, so that he can do that kind of work.
You have the accountant and treasurer collector and those couple in front of you? 'Cause I was
I'm sorry,
curious.
what?
I looked at the management report
Yep,
for first couple of items, the 130-something pages.
yep,
I looked at the professional and technical subline item
Yep.
for several of the departments.
yeah,
And I was curious as to, they seem to be relatively noticeable.
yeah, I brought it up in several accounts,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I was curious, I guess you have to ask them directly, what they were spending. I think one of them was $13,000. I understand the assessor went outside and put that under professional and technical, I think.
Yeah.
But the accountant, treasurer, collector, people like that, I'm curious.
Okay.
That would be interesting to know.
Yeah, because I did,
My departments,
yeah,
I'll ask.
I flagged it on several departments.
But we, keep in mind, we all voted on this last year.
Well, I know that, and I was thinking that, I'm like, how come I don't know this or remember it? And some of it could be that now that I'm sitting here, and the reason it's coming up is not so much the amount, is that so little of it has been spent. So in theory, unless something has seasonality, such as snow plowing or lawn care, I would expect it to be about 50% spent and 50%, coming down the pike. And I'm looking at this account, and we've spent 21.69%.
Which one is that?
the professional and technical.
Yeah, well,
for the-
keep in
for the
mind-
Which
town
department?
admin.
Yeah, but keep in mind, you know, if that's to hire an appraiser or hire an engineer to do something, there might not be any projects that he needs to do. And I don't want him spending money just because he's
Oh,
supposed to be
no,
fixing this. Okay.
I don't either, but again, this is why it flags.
No, I got you.
And in all of the other ones where I flagged it, it's for the same reason. Not just that it's high,
Sure.
but that we haven't spent much of it.
But you also have to remember, some things are seasonal as well.
Oh, you know, I know
And
that.
some things, their conferences and things like that don't come up until in the
Oh, yeah,
spring. and
but
that like
that's why
that.
I'm asking the question. I'm curious what it is, so that I can tell myself that, yep, that's exactly what it is. And again, this is specifically for several departments, the line item, professional and technical.
Yep.
You know, because like, again, there was one that came up, and I looked at it, and it was tree topping and lawn care, I think, in the DPW. Oh, yeah, seasonal, I got that. I understand why we've spent 86, % of it, because between now and June, we're not gonna do a whole lot more of that. We probably
Right.
did it all in July, August, September, October, so I get that part.
Yeah. But if you
What I
look
was
at,
looking for was the opposite. Accounts where we've spent so much, I'm like, oh my God, are we gonna take a big hit because it's gonna go over this year?
well, if you have the accountant in there, the accountant would have spent that money closing.
Yeah.
Which would have been, what, July, August, September, that kind of time frame. So that would have been burned if she was not carrying that burden herself.
Yeah.
Rather, she was having somebody come in and either do it or help her with it.
Her closing's gonna come out of the budget, that current fiscal year, not the come in July, the new one.
Well, the one you're looking at here is a management report for July 1 to now.
Yeah,
And that July 1 to now, or July, August, September, October is when they were closing. That's when you need that additional technical expertise to make sure you close correctly. And certify free cash and all that stuff.
You have any other
is
questions?
she doing, well,
I got a
ask her
couple,
that,
not a whole lot. Okay, so I'll spare everyone the account by account, but the other ones where I came up with professional and technical as a concern were assessors, treasurer, human resources, elections, and I only got as far as
elections
the
are
highway
usually.
department. And actually, it came up in the highway department as well.
Okay, the assessor went outside and hired a company that comes in
Do the commercial.
and does the reval that happens every 10 years, 5 years, something like that. And rather than hire that person permanently and have them sit there for a good long
Yeah.
time before you jump up. So that one would have been spent.
Okay.
And I remember we went through a whole exercise on how they were gonna do that. Treasurer collector might be a similar situation to what we've had in the finance side of the business, where they needed technical expertise to help with a number of things, especially in that July, August, September, October timeframe when they're trying to close the books.
I would say the treasurer, technical assistance or professional and technical is probably a bond advisor, an investment advisor, helping with the
Yeah.
trust funds and
Okay.
things like that.
Okay.
So that's probably throughout the year.
And elections are specifically for elections.
Yeah, and treasurer
Or training.
collector is running at 50%. it seemed like a lot of
Half the
money. I
year.
mean, it's $53,000. I was like, okay. I was curious what it was.
53,000.
That's right, I don't think that's right.
And then another one, just quickly, Conservation Commission, there's one called Conservation Land. It was $5,000. I'm just curious what conservation land is for the Conservation Commission.
It's probably land that they are responsible for and they have to manage, so it could be hiring somebody to cut the lawn, hiring somebody to do whatever.
Okay.
There is a cost to all that.
Okay, and then one thing, the appeals board, and again, this isn't huge, but they've already spent their entire budget for office supplies. So my concern was,
Maybe
No
they
more
bought
appeals.
everything up front.
are they suddenly going to have a
They're
big one?
crazy in
That's
that
so little
ZBA,
I'm
I
not
hear.
worried about
Okay,
it, but
I'm collecting supplies here for you.
the other
just
one
in
that was
case.
big was, the municipal center, the repair and maintenance account, they had greatly upped that, but now we've only spent 25% of it, so I'm curious, do they know there's something coming that's going to
They
spend all of that?
finish all the ramps, do they finish all of the
Yeah, I-
windows, that they would do and stuff like that?
Because so far they haven't, because they've only spent like
maybe that's what
25%
that's for.
of it. So, and was there any other one that really jumped at me? Oh, fuel and gas I was concerned with. We've already spent 68.6%. So my concern was, are we gonna run over and all of a sudden we've got $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 in fuel and gas expenses that's not in the budget? So I was concerned with that
You
one.
probably spend more in gas in the wintertime than you do in the spring and the summer because you are running trucks to plow the
Right.
roads.
Okay,
So I would say a lot of that has to do with seasonal.
okay, I kind of thought that, but I wasn't sure. I just wanted to bring it up, because again, what we're supposed to do is look out for potential
Yes, exactly.
hits. And to me, that was a potential hit.
Colleen?
Why
Can you
did-
tell I got way too into the weeds on this?
Why
Well, you're
does,
doing the budget review and we haven't even started the budget.
I know. Can you
ahead-
tell she's
go
a
ahead, Colleen.
business manager?
why does legal have two professional and technical accounts?
There are two different attorneys. One is the labor attorney and one is the general town council, and I
Right.
believe he separates it out that way.
Thank you, that was one of my questions too that I didn't get down.
I'm on top of this stuff.
Yep, yep.
But that's good, and again, and I'm gonna try to write some of these down so I don't ask them again, I promise. I'll remember, or I'll have it in writing.
That's kind of explained in the budget book too sometimes, so.
Yeah. So we do seem to cover some of the same questions year after year. I was wondering for myself, I take a lot of notes every year and they seem to vanish
Yeah,
before the next budget year, and I have the same, I'm wondering if maybe it makes sense to put some kind of Google Doc together or something where people can, as they have these questions, get answered,
oh, fax.
Put
We
'em
need a
in
fax
there.
page.
something
Ah,
like
there
that.
you
Yeah,
go.
we need a fax page,
The old think.
Something like that.
yeah. I'm just gonna put that down, create a fax page.
Any other concerns? I had some questions about personnel. So when I look through kind of, I would expect that personnel costs would be pretty consistently around 50% because presumably, full-time staff are getting paychecks and
I
it
would
should be
s-
around 50%?
Yeah, I would say in most departments, yeah, but I would say be careful in DPW, police, because certain times of year, summer, July, August is when they're taking vacation, and you have a tendency to have more overtime in those months, and then it slows down in the wintertime and it catches up, so I'd be careful on those departments, but the accountant's office, the town administrator's office, the building department, the treasurer, those should be right at 50%, because they are consistently paid throughout the year. There usually isn't overtime in those departments. So is that what you're noticing?
It's kind of all over the place. So like conservation, their personnel and agent, they're just, again, way under for what you
Oh,
would
But that-
keep in mind, they
That's
combined the
because
position
they're
I'm
last
just
year.
gonna
Combine
say
those
that, that's
positions.
because, yeah,
They combined
I
the
remembered
position, so
that.
maybe they haven't charged fully both departments back and forth. I don't know how he,
well, they also
maybe he
had a
brought in one
vacancy
person
for
to
a
be the
while.
assistant town planner and the conservation administrator. So who knows how I can't remember how he said he was paying.
They had the town planner, but then they put the assistant and Concom together.
Correct.
So that,
Yeah.
So that's probably why.
That's why
they-
So
there's
there
a
could be an
reduction.
offset somewhere else, or he just saved money by
Yep.
by
he
combining
just did it
those.
to save money, but I think.
So
Joe's
that'll be a
asking-
turn back at the end of the year.
Unclassified, it looked like there's a number of accounts that are over in unclassified, things like the town insurance and things like that, and
You pay those up front.
Yeah,
Those, you pay the general liability insurance.
not 100% though. It's
Well, because
there's
I'll
people,
tell you why. What ends up happening is, for example, you have workers' comp, you pay the premium in July. Property insurance, vehicles, you pay the premium, the main premium in July. You keep a surplus because they come in, they do an audit halfway through the year, and they adjust the workers' comp based on the final payroll after they do the audit. You may register vehicles throughout the year. Cars may come, cars may go. Like, for example, those two cruisers that we approved in the budget last year, probably Chief Crapo didn't get those on July 1st. He may have got those in August, or in September. So then you're gonna get billed for those later in the year, so you keep a little bit of a surplus. But most of the premiums, the main premiums are paid up front in July. Same with the pension budget, that's paid up front in July, so you'll see that at 100%. So it's just a matter of timing on some of these. So straight percentages, I'd be very careful looking at those, saying, well, wait a minute, we're through December, everything should be at 50%. Not the way it works.
Sure, okay.
And I had another question, speaking of unclassified, group life insurance, what's that?
0%.
Could be later in the year, you
What account's that in?
Group life insurance under total unclassifieds. Under
Life insurance on
unclassifieds.
everybody.
So if the account number is 119515172.
I think there is a policy for each employee. I don't know what the updates are, but it's a small policy that is part of the benefits.
Yeah, it's typically like salary or 2 times salary or something.
I don't know what it,
Okay, I was curious, I figured that's what it was, but I wanted to ask.
it's quite small, and then when if the employee decides to leave, or the position is left, then
Yeah.
it terminates,
Right. Yeah, it's strictly a part of while you're employed,
yes.
and it's usually twice your salary. Okay.
I should have thought of that.
So would it be more useful to have, I'm just trying to figure out as a committee, how we get through asking the questions, answering the questions, and actually identifying what the red flags might be on a
You
year-to-year
do-
basis?
Anything that you have questions for now as we're going through this year, these are the questions that you bring forward to them when you meet with your department heads. And then you go over there and you ask what your professional technical is going to be spent on. You get detailed, rundown from there. So, anything that you have concerned about now in your budget process, why is this late now, or why is it spent so much up front? You do it when you meet with your department heads.
I agree.
Does everyone have access to a Google account?
Yep.
Okay, so if we set up a Google Doc, literally, a frequently asked questions, and each of us, as we talked with our departments, then listed exactly what you're talking about, which I think is a super idea. So that next time when I have my questions, I'll go check my Google Doc first.
Because they were
And for
answered
legal,
before.
like legal's great, because that was so straightforward. Why are there 2 accounts? Because each attorney gets their own account.
So when,
Bingo.
and Dan and I did that, and I did that with Barry as well. When you go to these departments, you take that management report with you and say, this is where you're at, how come?
Right.
And that's when you start asking all those
Yeah.
questions. You've always got to have that piece of material with you when you're talking to the department heads,
Okay.
that management report. So hopefully it's up to date.
My
But
only
sometimes they've got a better report than I kept.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've got an up-to-date budget management report. than
My
we
only
do.
concern with the Google Doc would be if we're, referring to it in meetings, that makes it a public record. And
Okay.
I'm not sure how that works with Google Docs being, updated frequently.
Well,
So-
hopefully, if you're going through the management report and you have a question, you're going into Google Docs and you're answering it yourself, and you're not bringing it to the meeting and asking all of us the same question. Hopefully, we're not gonna ever mention that at a public meeting.
Yeah, I
because
want to
that's
make, it's going to be more like a dictionary.
Correct.
I want to look up the definition of 2 accounts under legal.
Plus, if it's a public record, who cares? It's information.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
not
Oh, yeah, I'm
personal.
not,
Right,
that's
yeah.
not what I'm
No
worried about.
discussion, No
If-
discussion in there.
worried
If
about
we're
public
updating, and
access to
if
the
we're
document?
deleting something and changing an answer, how that might be, how that might work with public record, of keeping a record of what it previously was.
Okay, we'll look into that.
I'm very excited right now to make a motion to approve the town report as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
There's no pictures.
I just had one comment under discussion. I'm wondering if we need to just put one statement in about our outstanding OPEB liability.
Okay.
So I was reading through the S&P report and also the management statement, and I've just noticed a thread about OPEB and because, and again, it's one of those things where we have a little bit of money in an account and we have a large liability, and we don't have a great plan over time to deal with OPEB. So
I think it's a good idea.
just a single, and I think where I would put it is probably, you mentioned our outstanding capital, kind of the whatever, there remains a backlog of capital projects
Right.
in that,
Okay.
because that seems to be kind of, potential impacts to the budget and sort of negative impacts to the budget, I
Yeah,
guess.
Okay.
just one statement in there that mentions our, I think it's about 55 million OPEB liability versus, we've got $1.2 million, I
Please
think.
explain what it is, because a lot of people, they don't hear it all the time out in the community.
Right.
Yep.
So explain what it is. Because they'll go, well, what's OPEB?
And it is
Right.
other post-employee
Yeah, but the
employment
thing is,
benefits.
we haven't talked about it before. There has to be a plan, there has to be a policy. I wouldn't make an arbitrary statement in a report, and then everybody's looking at, where did this come from? I don't know if I want to put
Okay.
that in there.
I get it.
I'm
There
sorry.
was a
just-
study in 2015.
Yeah, we did
About
talk
OPEB.
about that, but it hasn't
Yep.
been anywhere, so all of a sudden, we're gonna plop it into our report. I'd be a little careful about that. I understand your point, we need to address it. And that probably hurt us when we went for our AAA bond rating, because we hadn't addressed OPEB, that
Yep.
may have prevented us from
It
getting
did,
there.
it was mentioned specifically.
Yeah, so, I would just wait until we hear what the plan is, and then we can address OPEB in our report. But
Okay.
it seems like it'd be coming out of left field right now.
How does the rest of the committee feel about
'Cause
that?
I don't think, again, I think there are a lot of moving parts with it, because I don't think they know what they wanna do, right? Am I wrong?
No. And I do have the report from 2015. I mean, it's an old report, but,
Yeah, so
and there was no plan then,
But
so.
what we could say, if we wanted to do that, is OPEB, and we can spell it out, other personnel,
Other
other
post-employment benefits.
post-employment benefits, okay, remain a concern. Because I kind of agree, I feel like leaving it out, we probably should put it in, because it has potential to be huge.
Well, it is huge.
It is huge.
It's 55 million.
But right now, it's not a specific requirement to be funded. It's
Right,
a
you can do it year to
recommendation.
year.
It's a recommendation. Wall Street is looking at it, but if we're gonna put it in our report, I wanna have more information about it and not just a sentence in the town report. That's just my opinion.
Well, remember that what the town report is, it is simply stating our current, it says right here, our current climate. We're simply reporting to everybody where we are today. And where we are today is that we are still concerned with, okay, our OPEB liability,
I don't even know if we have to register it as a concern.
okay?
We can just mention what our liability is,
And then can you write working on a policy towards?
according to the formula. And I don't know if we need much more than that, but I hear what you're saying, Mark.
It is gonna scare people.
I don't want to scare
That's- yeah, I
people
don't wanna
because
scare
this is the same thing that
And I
all
don't
of
want, yeah,
other
'cause
towns
that
are
can-
dealing
that can
with.
backfire.
Because you
Can you,
don't wanna,
right, it's gonna
working
backfire.
on
What?
policy.
We owe what?
Yeah, no, that I don't wanna do, oh my God, no.
Right, and it's not,
Colleen has a good suggestion, saying put something in there, and the finance committee is encouraging us working on a policy to address our OPEB liability.
So you mention it and what we're trying to do with it.
Yeah, I think that's a
Okay,
good
so that would
suggestion.
be
I don't
the
have a
last
problem with that.
paragraph. Finance committee continues to collaborate
it.
with. Okay,
Yep, with the administration on
Right.
addressing our OPEB liability.
I think
I have
that's
no
good.
problem adding that, so I'll amend my motion to accept the town report with that amendment.
Format, the second sentence says, "To fulfill its duties, the finance committee is responsible for the following, semicolon. Receiving, analyzing, blah, 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 blah." Can we bullet, indent those? Make it more legible, readable?
They're encouraging no bullets. I included the directions,
Can
for
we-
this
can we indent?
report. So I took even, in the beginning, on the very first page, I took Irene's 1 through 10 out, because it specifically says not to indent.
That's
So you
right. I
can't even
saw that.
indent?
It says not to.
No, it.
because they want it to be consistent with all the others, right? It's for consistency
It's only
with the other
consistency.
reports.
Okay, the line that says
So they're all
managing the town's
consistently
reserve
poorly
fund,
read.
which is used for unforeseen expenditures, semicolon. Take the semicolon out,
Yeah, that semicolon shouldn't be there.
okay,
Actually, that's a colon, not a semicolon.
Yeah,
colon, semicolon.
That should come out.
See,
what,
that's
the
why.
colon?
Why
Column
should that
shouldn't
come
be
out?
Managing the town's reserve fund, which is used for unforeseen expenditures, you have a colon there, there should be no colon.
Okay.
Well, what that was, Mark, is there was a 1, 2, 3, and 4. following, and so basically,
But isn't that one of our duties, what we're responsible for? Managing the
Irene,
town's
can you
reserve fund.
explain it better?
Now,
What,
I'm still trying to figure out where you are.
the very first page,
Yeah?
In the middle.
go down about halfway to managing.
Oh, okay. Managing the town's reserve fund, which is used for unforeseen expenditures, okay.
Period.
That was a number. And then, so Irene originally had this as a 1 through 10, and managing happened to be one of the numbers.
Yeah.
And then it was an A, B, and C, excuse me.
Okay, so I had subcategories.
It was a subcategory.
But those aren't
In that case, I
subcategories.
would just go ahead and, just go ahead and take the
Those
colon
aren't
out.
subcategories,
Take the colon out.
right?
No?
Okay, so take that colon out and the rest of it flows nicely. Is anything gonna be easy about this meeting tonight?
No,
Okay, just checking.
they are subcategories, reserve fund is it?
Do they specifically say no bullet points?
It said no
Yes.
indent.
No indentation.
Well, it's from what you emailed. It says do not indent paragraphs, which I thought would mean just like in a regular paragraph, don't indent the first line. I didn't think that would mean for like for bullet points.
I know, because in her instructions, she has 1 through 5. Now, why is that
There you
fair?
go.
That is, no, that's the charter.
I'm joking. I'm making a joke.
Okay.
He actually
And I
does
know-
have an example.
And I know some departments send in their reports and they indent.
Yeah,
All right,
and
so
I'm
again, I'll make a
looking
motion
at
that we
last
approve the
year's.
report as presented with the amendment to add the line about OPEB.
Second.
Thank you.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Oh, no, now further.
All in favor?
Aye. I make a
Opposed?
motion, oh, sorry.
Carried.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes of November 20th as presented.
Second?
I have a motion and
Oh,
a
yeah,
second.
we'll
Any
do-
discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion
I make a
carries.
motion, we pay the internet bill to Sue, reimburse her for the internet. How much is that for, Sue?
42.
How much?
42.
$42.
So, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Matt, I sent out the fire study,
I was, yeah,
all the finance committees tonight.
Thank you.
I didn't,
it's online. I was gonna say, I found it
yeah, well,
online.
I've had it for quite a while and I just assumed everybody else did. Sorry about that. But I
Wow,
sent it
look at
out.
that. Peter Adams.
And if you don't get it or you can't open it for some reason, just go to the town site and you can find it.
You are so efficient.
I thought they weren't ready to present, or is that to date?
This is the
study?
fire study.
Yeah, it's a 225-page document.
Ooh, why did
It's
I
the
hit
study,
download on
it's
my phone?
not the
Oh, okay, not the report.
recommendations, not the recommendations yet.
Okay.
And this is just the full report.
Yep.
So Irene, excuse me, do you have the proper wording for the OPEB edition?
No?
Well, what's wrong with you?
So tell me exactly what you want and I will add it. And where do we want to put it?
So the statement is something like Grafton, the town of Grafton has a outstanding OPEB liability of 55 point, whatever the
No, we want to
actual,
leave the amount out.
you do.
Yes,
Yes,
that's a large amount to.
yeah, that's gonna scare people to death.
All right.
Scared me when I saw it.
So, I thought we were gonna put it where it says, Finance Committee continues to
Pass
collaborate
that
with
down too, Dan, thanks.
school, select
That's
board,
just for
school
me,
department, and
sorry.
town administrator in forecasting and looks forward to more tri-committee meetings as we approach
go
the
with-
FY '21
That's
budget
just fine.
and beyond.
Why did we put it as?
And then we could put Finance Committee,
Fine print.
is also
Colleen, that goes to Sue.
Okay.
paying
I was like,
attention
I
to
don't-
our
We
OPEB
don't
liability.
get to,
I think we should put it a little asterisk, put it at the bottom as a footnote and put it
That
in
was
tiny
first.
print.
Okay,
Read the fine print.
we can do that.
No, I'm joking.
Okay, it needs to go one of two places. It either goes in the paragraph where we talk about all the things coming up, the fire study, et cetera, the backlog of capital projects, and then we could put, also, the town's OPEB liability, period. Or we can add it to the statement saying, this is why we continue, we've got some very real budgetary pressures,
yes.
you know.
I think that's where it should go.
Yeah.
We
Should
Okay,
be
so
in
in
there.
that case, perhaps we should put that this paints a picture of the very real budgetary pressures that the town faces, period. Next sentence. Among these are the town's OPEB liability, period. This illustrates why the finance committee continues to see, et cetera. Don't read the rest of it. How's that sound?
Fine with that.
Okay.
Yep. And then if anybody's smart enough to look up OPEB, then they can
Right,
go down
Just
that.
write out other
go down that
post-employment
rabbit hole.
benefits.
right.
And the one person who reads the report may ask about it.
I hope so.
You never know.
Right. We should have some kind of plan.
There's always one
No,
of those.
She
There's
joined the
always
board.
one person who reads it. There's always one.
good
That's very funny. That's a good one, Dan.
I was curious as to whether the governor would put a reference to the OPEB for the state in his budget and in his speech.
I think he's trying to avoid it.
Yes.
All
Well,
right.
he stepped up to the T.
So Sue, is there anything that you wanted to mention about the fire study, or should we just kind of
I
put
think
it?
you have to read it if you want to have a discussion on it, but no, nothing up front. They're making recommendations, and I've not seen the recommendations. I got the fire study when it first came out. I texted Ed and asked him for it right away because I was anxious to see it. And
All right.
The impression I got,
assumed all of you picked it up.
the impression I got was that Tim is relying on the new hire chief, assistant chief, to kind of organize it and figure it
So
out.
why
and
do we have
come
the
forward.
committee?
Pardon?
So why do we have that committee?
They were the ones who were going to say, we recommend you start with the command structure first, and then you build things out, and
Did
make
they
some of-
submit the recommendations?
I don't know.
No?
I
And
happen
The
to,
committee is the one that got the report going and presented.
They formed another committee to make the recommendations from them, I think. So,
I just remember hearing the presentation at one of the meetings.
it's a
and,
big
um,
report.
It's a huge report, there's a lot in there, and there's not consensus as to the
Full-time.
conclusions drawn by the people that did the study. There was some pushback on those conclusions, but I think the number one thing, I got the sense, the one thing there was consensus on, we do need a full-time fire chief. Okay, given the size of the town, the number of structures, we have hit that point. Okay, we are no longer a small farming community with 100 buildings, you know, spread out over however many square miles we are. That's the one thing that I got from this. Everything else after that, you know, however they want to do it and decide it, whatever, but that's the one thing that I seem to get
Well,
a
they-
sense of.
That's
in
what's
the-
in the recommendation
There's,
study.
is there? I haven't seen it. I know that there is pushback from the men, that they don't want a full-time fire department.
Right.
They like their on-call. They like to be volunteer firemen. At least that's what I'm getting from some of them.
isn't the approach going to be that they will have volunteers on call?
Well, let's do this. Sue, thanks for sending it out. Let's all review it. I'll put it on the agenda on a future meeting. And after people have had a chance to kind of process all the information, we can kind of talk about it.
It is an interesting read. Yes, I've read it.
This
And
is
I'll
this
see
is
if I
a
can
new
get a hold
document,
of-
though.
I'll see if I can get a hold of the recommendation. Well, the recommendations are in the study from this guy, but they're not agreed upon by a lot of the people in the fire department.
And
So
didn't
the-
they feel like they didn't get a lot of input either? That's why they started the committee, so that they could get some input as well?
Well, yeah, there were some people who felt that they should have been called and talked to. A lot more of the fire department should have had the opportunity to express their feelings, and it was only just a very small group of people who were able to voice their opinions. And they never interviewed all of the firemen. They'd gather them together and say, let's discuss this. Never happened.
Yeah.
So,
So I think it would make more sense to wait until we have that recommendation from the committee, in addition to the report from the consultant.
Right.
So,
I agree.
Yep, that's what the agenda tonight was about, was the fire study.
I'm pretty sure their
The fire
recommendations are
study
coming in.
committee's recommendations.
right.
So they went before the select board, I believe, with some ideas. I guess like a preview of what some of the, and that's where they came up with to help Tim prepare for the budget. their recommendations of those 4 positions. And so Tim, I think, put those 4 positions into his planning process. But they were supposed to produce a separate document, which was a full set of recommendations, which took the consultant's report and then
Right.
basically said, how are we gonna implement this, and what areas do we have consensus on?
And I
So-
know the buildings are a major issue.
Yep.
In South and North Carolina, so.
More capital. All
More
right,
capital.
Which-
financial policies.
Which, when we go meet with all of these departments, one of the things I ask is, you know, do you have all the toys or the buildings, et cetera, that you need? But I guess I've been listening to some guru about capital. I don't see a real examination, discussion of the capital plan as part of the budgeting process. Am I wrong on that, or am I missing, I'm missing a lot these days, but is
Can you
that?
say that again?
There isn't.
So can you get Colleen that old capital
Yeah,
book we
I wish
used
I
to
had
have?
it in my archives. I have an old capital policy.
Don't, you know that
Yeah.
old capital we used to get?
So there isn't,
If Colleen could
there
look at
isn't a
that.
substantive discussion on the capital plan
Mhm.
in the budget process as it exists today.
Okay.
So Colleen and I will talk about our kind of feedback from the select board in just a little bit. We want to return back to that, so that we're
Yes.
actually not just looking at the budget year, but actually we're looking
Yeah.
forward.
I am most concerned because I asked the schools if, because they have a lot of buildings and roofs and all that stuff, parking lots, how are they doing on their capital management, et cetera? And he said he's got something like a $20 million backlog. Jeez.
What did you say, Mary? They said what?
He said he's got about a $20 million backlog.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
So
With that many buildings?
I
and
have
that
nothing to
many
do with the schools
windows
except
and-
on the finance committee, and gadzooks, that sounds like a lot.
It is a lot. It's huge.
Okay.
Our backlog with capital is what it was for the roads back in 2014 is what we have today with the rest of capital. So,
You know my David Ross, it was Ross
I'll be right
story?
back.
When either the school or the override was coming up, he pointed to the school people and said, if we give you the school, are you gonna maintain it, or are we gonna come back here in 10 years and have to build a new one? Well, if you don't maintain those buildings, you're gonna need to replace them pretty quick,
sure, absolutely.
before my time.
So we'll talk about that in a little bit. I do want to kind of get through the agenda as much in order as we can here. So we have the financial policies. So Sue sent those out. Hopefully, everybody had a chance to take a look at them. The idea, I think, with these is we had sent them along to the select board to be reviewed and recommitted to. I don't believe there was I don't believe it happened for whatever reason. We have 3 new members on the select board, and I would,
I did send a letter out and ask them to look them over
Yep.
and to review them and then sign them if they, agreed with it. But I had explained that you and Mark had looked into all of it and agreed that it was fine and it looked good and there
Yep.
were no changes. But I never heard anything after that.
Well, then we should push again. And did we have our financial advisor look at these? Do we know?
I don't believe we did.
We should probably have the financial advisor who advises on bond issues and things like that. to
That would be a good idea.
Should also look at these as well and comment on them. I think
Especially
they're
the
good.
debt
They're good policies.
Except, especially the debt policy one. I think the
Absolutely.
financial advisor should look at that.
Because, Wall Street looks at this as part of their review of the management structure. So these are
I
very
mean,
good
this was
policies.
done a long time ago.
They're good
so-
policies.
Yeah, they are.
But they need to be updated, you need to change selectmen to select board, things like that. But overall, I agree. I think these are fine.
Okay. I mean, if nothing else, I'd like to have them all read them so that they're all familiar with them, because it's not something that you're gonna just, they're difficult to find.
Yep.
It took me a little bit to actually get them out of Candy, because she couldn't find one of them. And B, it's pretty dry material, and it's not something that you're gonna get in the select board 101 packet, coming
Yep.
on. So I think just for them to review as we go into the budget season is probably a good
And
idea.
look who's on the board there.
I know.
This is the selectman who signed this originally. It's a long, long time ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So if the committee's happy, then I'll just send that note along
Yep.
to them. And I'll ask for that,
And then ask because I think it's the select board that's gonna have to ask for the financial
Yep.
guy to look at it, and just ask them if they would ask him to review the debt policy, the financial policies,
I'll do that,
just for their input.
okay. All right, the next thing on the agenda is the role of Finance Committee, as it's described in the town charter. So in the packet, there is, the section of the charter. Sorry, this is after the report of the Finance Committee.
Is it this one here?
Yes, it is.
So I'm the one that asked that this be put on the agenda, because I think, from what I've seen, I think our role in the budget process has diminished. And I'd like to see us have a more active role in helping solve some of the issues that the town's facing. I think we have a lot of good expertise on this committee. We have people with unbelievable experience on the committee. So how long have you been on here now?
20 years.
And Heather, you've been on for what, 12? Yeah. So, I mean, you have a lot of good experience on this committee, and I think this committee should be used as a resource in the process. And I also think the charter requires us to be. So if you look on the thing that Sue gave out under Article 6, Financial and Fiscal, Section 6.6, Action on the Budget, it says the Finance Committee shall file a report containing its recommendations for actions on the proposed operating budget, which report shall be available at least 7 days before the date on which the town meeting acts on the proposed budget. When the budget is proposed by the town administrators before the town meeting for action, it shall first be subject to amendments, if any, proposed by the Finance Committee. So, and I'm only gonna talk from my experience, there's always a line item in the budget that's presented that says Finance Committee recommendations, in every town I've ever worked for and every budget I've ever put together. We don't do that here. But if we're gonna have a report of the budget from the Finance Committee, I think there should be another line item, another line, not line item, I'm sorry, another column, thank you, Barry. Another column says Finance Committee recommendation.
So
We
in,
did that.
We used to do
We used
that.
to do that.
We haven't done it in the 3 years I've done the
Yeah.
budget.
No, we haven't done it since Tim's arrived.
Yes.
He did it the first 2 years he was there, and then he just eliminated it.
Okay, I'd like to see that, and I don't know how we go about getting that back in there, but I know as a taxpayer and a resident of this town looking at the budget, I'd like to see what the Finance Committee has to say
Yep.
on a line item. You
Can
know,
you
maybe
give
we,
an
maybe
old,
we differ on something.
Budget that we used at town meeting that had that, those columns,
think
we
that's
go back.
unreasonable, right?
No, yeah, I've seen it in other town meetings, it's a,
Okay,
it's a thing.
okay, all right.
Like $3 here and $2.
so what you're talking about is, you know, we're at town meeting and on screen,
Yep.
we've got each of the accounts.
Yep.
Yep.
And it says Finance Committee
And
recommendation.
As we're voting on those, there's a column that
It says
says.
Because
Finance
there's a
Committee
column
recommendation,
that
but-
says town administrator recommendations, and then there should be a finance committee
Now,
recommendation.
according to the charter, the budget that gets moved on the floor of town meeting is the town administrators. That's great. And hopefully, we'll be in agreement with him when he
And if
presents
we're
his
not-
budget, which we usually are. We try
usually
to work
But if we're
cooperatively.
not, that shows up and.
And then people are gonna say, well, hey, how come the Finance Committee? Because I remember last year, there was an issue on something simple like buying her a computer.
Yep,
It was like, what, $1,500? And we were fighting back and forth over
Yeah.
$1,500. You know, maybe there's a column there that says Finance Committee wants $1,500 here. And if he, you know, then they come back as, well, you have to find the revenue for it. We will. We know how to develop that. So I just want us to, I guess, kind of get the respect that the Finance Committee should have and the expertise that we have. Nobody in town, other than the selectmen and the town administrator, goes through the budget as much as the Finance Committee does.
I don't think the selectmen do.
Okay, so nobody besides the Finance Committee, you know what I'm saying?
I
So,
do.
yeah,
so I would like us to, you know, the charter gives us the responsibility to hold public hearings on the budget, gives us the responsibility to meet with the department heads on the budget. Let's present something, because that's what we're here for. That's my opinion.
Sure. Well, discuss.
oh, I agree, I think we should, I've been asking for that
Well
back
done.
for a long time.
So, Mr. Chair, I think what happened is that, in the past, the budgets became later and later and later. And it's, always been the goal of the committees, Finance Committee, Select Board, Town Administrator, to, go to town meeting with a united front. And not an argument, and not a
Yeah.
on town meeting floor. So I think that if, I think that's one of the reasons why, it stopped, because printing was a factor. Was really logistics, where, you know, we went to print because you have to go to print early in order to get it printed. And by that time, the numbers were, weeded out and everything was solidified as going in as a united front. So if this happens, with the columns again, which I think is a great idea, I think that the presentation to the town administrator has to happen during the public hearing. So that all the numbers have to be together, you know, when we sit down and talk with the with the town administrator, about that one article, that is, or actually one or two, based on capital and operating, that is presented in that entire warrant. And because you spend the entire month of March, working on this, and, well, February to March, working on this, and then you have one little article to talk about that has a huge number on it. So that's where the column discussion, I believe, should take place, and then, come together with what is the source of your income, or what is the source of the funding for that $1,500 that you want to give to X department, et cetera, and not as a discussion on the town meeting floor. I think that was the whole premise.
Past town administrators, since I've been in town, all the town administrators always had that column because it looked good for them as well, to
Yeah.
show that the finance committee and the town administrator came together and worked together as a team.
What would typically be in that column for
What?
finance? What would typically be in that column for, on most of the accounts?
The same.
The same.
It would be,
Yeah,
if we agreed.
Which is
it'd be
fine if it's the same.
Like how
Yeah.
last year we didn't agree that, that they wanted, or they didn't want a assistant town planner, or, you know,
Right,
stuff like that.
right.
Like, we've said, what we.
Oh, this is the town clerk.
Thank
Yeah.
you,
Yes,
thank you.
yes, yes,
So
yes.
stuff like that, like if we thought that, you know, we could somehow finagle the budget so that you could have an assistant town clerk, then we should show that. But it's unfortunately, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, it's up to us to figure out where that money can come from.
Right.
And I don't wanna use the excuse that we don't have enough time. Well, let's make sure there's enough time.
Sure. So what I'm reading in this language is we should file a report containing recommendations for the operating budget.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it has to be in the big document at town meeting. I think if we have some recommendations, we can file a report which describes exactly what you're talking about, which is, look, we think we should swap this for this because of X, Y, and Z.
I wanna do both. I wanna have the column,
Have you
and then
ever
I wanna have a
seen,
report.
have you ever seen the columns
I haven't.
at town meeting?
Well, here it is right here.
I'm sure I saw them at the meeting.
No,
at
Sue,
one
do you
point.
have an old
Well,
one?
if
that
you
can
look
get?
at this, what goes to
There's
town
nothing
meeting is a document that says actual budget. I don't know why you need the department requesting what goes to town meeting. You don't need that. You got the FY '21 town administrator. Why can't there be a column that says FY '21 finance committee?
And what he did is he took out the finance committee column and put in the percentage difference, which is not, you know, I don't think that's all important actually, but, but he took away the finance committee column all the way down. So I'll see if I can dig up an
Yeah, I'll
old,
look and see what I can.
I'm sure there's one in the files.
well, I think it would
I just
be,
don't have it handy.
yeah, I think it would be good for them to see it.
I just want us to make sure that we're doing our charter responsibilities, and this is my third budget with you. I don't think we've done that to the degree that we should do it in the past. So
And we
that's
get
why I
pushed-
wanted to put this on the agenda tonight.
And we've always gotten pushback from former select board who kept saying it's Tim's budget. Well, it is Tim's budget, but when it comes to us, it's like the, what they do at the state level, it's the, what do you call it, that committee?
Ways and Means. yeah.
Ways and Means Committee, that's what we are.
Sure.
And that's how it was described to me when I went to an MMA meeting, and once it leaves Tim to the finance committee, it is our budget, and that's what we are presenting to the town. So, hopefully we could agree with him on everything.
I guarantee you, 99.9% of the time, after having discussions and debates and back and forth, and
Yeah.
we'll agree with them.
Yeah,
I've done 11 budgets in Groton, and 11 budgets I've gone in unified 100% with the Finance Committee. Because we discuss, we go back and forth, and we come to an agreement. I don't know if that's gonna happen this year, I'm having a fight over a sewer payment, but anyway, you guys don't need to know that. But anyway, I just wanna have a more collaborative process with us.
So
That's
just to
all.
play devil's advocate, do you think that someone will say, well, if it's gonna match, why do we need it?
Because it shows that we worked with him and we got to the same conclusion. We had
Right.
two sets of eyes looking at a budget, and two sets of eyes came to an agreement.
And on the rare occasion when it doesn't match, I think it's good to have that transparency so that voters will know that that's a rare thing. Like, if we're not showing it, it's kind of like, what aren't we showing?
Yeah, what is the Finance Committee doing? What are we doing?
and it bothers me that we come in the fall and we have all these budget adjustments. Like, and I'm sitting here going, well, then we really didn't have a balanced budget that we took to town, because we're making all these adjustments and adding more to the budget. And I can agree that there might be some numbers that come in late, but it seems like we're getting to be more and more adjustments. We never used to do that.
Yeah, we shouldn't have that
Never
many
used to
adjustments in
do
the
that.
fall.
And so when I see all these numbers and the departments that need adjusting, then I'm going, well, obviously, somebody's not communicating well enough to know what's needed in this department, that we're adjusting numbers in October when the budget just started in July. So there's some communication gaps going on between the town administrator and the department heads, because we're always making adjustments to these budgets. That's
Okay.
my opinion.
So how do we broach this? So what I would recommend, because I'm full of recommendations, and motions and everything.
I take directions from you guys. I serve at the pleasure of the committee.
I
So
would-
you guys need to tell me what
I
you
would
want.
like to set up a meeting with the town administrator to talk to him, and maybe the chair, and I'd be happy to join you, to talk to him and say, listen, we would like to see this year. Let's do it. Let's work together on this. So whenever you want to set that up with him, let me know and I'll be there.
Okay. So how does the rest of the,
I
Sounds
think that's
good.
fine.
Yeah.
okay.
He's not gonna be receptive, it's 9 of us. Not receptive at all, but if it's just a couple of people speaking for the board and saying this is what the finance committee would like to get back to and see.
You get back, you gotta use that, get back to, we've
Yeah.
done
Yes,
it.
get
I
back
think
to,
he'll, I think, you know
we had
something?
it.
Tim's a reasonable guy. I think he'll accept it.
All right. I'll set it up
Okay. Thank you, Matt.
anytime.
And thank you for listening to me tonight on that.
No, it's an important thing. I have always felt that we spend a lot of time, actually, you know, and people are very diligent about, you know, going line by line and having all these discussions, and not all of it's visible, and it's
And the
important work that we
department
do.
heads like to meet with the finance committee.
Yep.
They do like to sit down and meet with us, and they tell us a lot.
I've had excellent meetings with the department heads
Yep.
I meet with, so I enjoy it. You got great staff here, you really do.
More than they're given credit for.
Okay, so now we're on to member topics. I asked Mark to put together a quick presentation on the budget process, and I'd like to kind of use that as a kickoff to talking about the budget process this year in Grafton and
Well, one each.
different scenarios that we might be facing. So, for anybody who's not aware, Mark just went through, or is in the middle of
Oh my God, did you bring your budget?
I brought you my budget message.
an expected shortfall in Groton.
Yeah. Groton is going through the same thing that Grafton is going through. Last year, we put our operating budget together on our 5-year projection. We
Kill the tree here.
did, I'm sorry.
You did kill the
Well,
tree,
the
right?
few.
All right.
We determined that we were gonna have a $500,000 deficit going into fiscal year '21. So we put a committee together over the summer, we looked at it, and then when the finance committee and selectmen got together to give me my budget guidance, which we have financial policies that say that the town manager will not start a budget until he gets guidance from the finance committee and the selectmen. they said to me, give us two budgets, give us a level services budget that shows where things would need to be for everybody being whole. And then if there's a deficit, how would you balance that? And if you have to make cuts, make equal cuts to the town side and the school side.
Correct.
So if the deficit's 500,000, 250 from the town, 250 from the school. That was the guidance that the board
Right.
gave me. So I gave you, I'm giving you this document here because this explains how I went through that process, and it shows how a budget is put together. And for those of you who haven't been through it before, I think this is if you read this, and I know it's 20 pages, and I'm sorry, I'm very long-winded, as you can tell from finance committee meetings. I think you'll get an understanding of how that process works. And I've also given you in the back, starting on page 21, I've also given you how a levy limit is calculated, which, of course, most of you already know how that happens, and then how revenues are generated, and then where the budget surpluses and deficits are. So I think this gives you a good handle on how to put something together. And I know Tim does something very similar to this, and he gives it to you when you get the budget document. But I think if you go through this, I think it will help you as you look at what Tim is going through right now and putting his budget together. And the one thing that you'll see in this presentation, and one thing that I'm a little nervous about this year, is I'm very aggressive in revenues. And I don't like being aggressive in revenues. I like being conservative in revenues because that leads to budget. You'll never have a budget revenue shortfall, and it leads to a strong free cash position, which can be used to help fund capital
Right.
items, that's what we do here in Grafton. So I don't wanna, I wanna be very careful when we look at the way Tim established the revenues this year. I know the other night he gave us a line item, and he said it was a risk, the $360,000 on the marijuana. So I want to be very careful as we go through those and to pay attention to those numbers. Now, we did get good news from the state in the governor's budget, which hopefully the legislature will carry through, $300,000 more in state aid. Tim was counting on 100 when he gave us his number, so that's good news. So that's how a budget's put together. This is the process that Groton went through, and I think it'll help us as we go through the process here. And I just wanted to put that on the table to everybody tonight.
So you had input from the finance committee over the summer.
Well, yeah, what they did is they established a working group, and the working group was made up of a representative from the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board, a representative from the Finance Committee, a representative from the School Committee, and then the town manager, the school superintendent, and the school business manager, and the town accountant. We met all summer. I built three budgets, fiscals 21, 22, and 23, based on assumptions, and the school did the same thing. We put it all together, and at the end of the summer, it showed that we were gonna have a $500,000 deficit. So when we went out to the departments and we had the departments put their budgets together, when I put the preliminary level services budget together, the deficit was $564,000 on actual numbers. So the work over the summer was proven out. So then I had to cut $280,000 from the town and $280,000 from the school to balance it. And you go through, if you read this, it'll show you the process, it'll show you how I got to that number, it'll show you what my recommendations were, and it'll show you where I would put money back in as money became available. So it's a process that we need to go through now here in Grafton, and I'm sure Tim is going through the same thing right now, where he's projected an $800,000 level services budget deficit. And so he's gonna have to get that down to zero. So does the school take half and the town take half? Is that a strategy? That's the type of thing that I know we need to have conversations about as we go through the budget to settle it. The $800,000 shouldn't come solely from the school. It's not fair to the school
I
department.
don't think so either.
It shouldn't.
Crazy, yeah.
It shouldn't. So.
It can't.
It can't. You devastate the school,
Yeah.
the school district. So you have to, I think you have to work collaboratively, and that's what I would like to see us do. And I think if you go through this, you'll see how one town did it. And it was pretty, we have our big finance committee budget meeting this coming Saturday with all the department heads. They do it jointly, the selectmen and the finance committee in Groton do it together. They don't meet with every department like we do. They meet with the big departments that drive the budget. They don't meet with the building inspector or the town planner. But they meet with the police and the fire and the highway and the water and the sewer and the schools and town manager and things like that. So it's a good process.
How do you do your process for capital?
Same thing. The finance committee gives me direction. I have $500,000 to spend in capital. And there's a little section in here that explains how I put the capital budget together. And I put that together, and I present the capital and the budget at the same time on December 31st.
Right.
And then I make a presentation to both boards jointly the first week of January, and then then it's the Finance Committee's budget to run with. Because in Groton, the budget that goes to the town meeting is not the town manager's, it's the Finance Committee's budget.
Right.
What kind of people do you have on the finance committee?
Well, the chairman is a CFO, a former CFO of a major Fortune 500 company. We have a couple of accountants on there. We have a DPW director from another community on there. We have a retired business manager on there. There's 7 members. It's a good diverse group of people. It's a strong finance committee. So, like us, not as good as this one. Only because I'm on this one. Don't tell them I said that, but that's the makeup.
Okay.
And I meet regularly with the chairman of the finance committee. As a matter of fact, I had a meeting with him today to go over some numbers, long-term projections and things like that. So I sit down with him regularly and we talk, and one of the selectmen joined us today to go over some ideas going into Saturday. So
And
we
you
try to
have
keep it very collaborative.
Good open communication with the school.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. You know, and it's a little different because it's a school district,
Right.
not a school department. So they are more autonomous, and we have very little say over their budget. They give us an assessment.
Like
Yep.
at Blackstone.
If we don't fund that assessment, they can call a super town meeting and force that assessment on the
Right.
town. So collaboration and cooperation is essential, but there's no reason why that can't exist with a school department as well.
Right.
How many towns are in that collab?
There's only two.
There's only two,
There's only
okay,
two, Groton and
okay.
Dunstable.
All right.
There's only two, so, this was probably the toughest budget I've done in 12 years in Groton, but hopefully we'll get through it. I'm pushing a 5-year override. We'll see what happens.
What's the population in Groton?
A little over 11,000, 11,500, I think.
So I had some free time and I watched his budget presentation.
Me too.
Really cool. And, but he has this major initiative and budget concerns section that I thought was really cool. And then he also prioritized he would bring back from his cuts if money became available.
Yep.
And I thought that was really interesting to see too, and I would like to somehow include that for Grafton.
So, yeah, so the idea that you kind of start zero base with no override, and then as you get upside surprises potentially,
Right.
here's the priority for restoring service levels
Right.
in the various budget.
I thought that was awesome.
I already got some good news today. The Neshoba Tech, the technical school, I level funded the budget for the preliminary budget because it's so far in advance. I have to do my budget by December 31st. I wish it was later because you get more information, so I have to guess on what health insurance is going to be. I have to guess on the assessments. So I level funded, and I found out our assessment's going to go down, so it's going to free up money. So the school superintendent called me up, and she goes, "Is that all mine?" I said, "No." I said, "Hold on." I said, 50% of yours, 50%, you know, that's what 50%. You get half, I get half, and that's how we're going to do it. So it's actually kind of funny. And then, guess what? We got an extra $2,000 in state aid in Groton this year, so I'm very excited. I don't know how I'm going to spend it
That-
all.
You could buy Sue a new computer.
I could buy you a new computer, that's what I can do.
You're a 90-10 community?
96.4.
Oh, shit.
No, worse than us.
So the next thing I would look at is the assessed value of the property.
1.6 billion is the assessed value of Groton.
Same ballpark.
Yeah, but we only have 4% commercial.
So,
A lot
talking,
of open space, 49% of Groton is protected property.
You need
There's
a
32 square miles.
Starbucks and a
Wow.
Costco and
Yeah,
a
you know
Walmart.
that, yes.
And a Walmart.
so talking through this budget year and the work that we have to do, I'm aware that we have a lot of work to do. I think we're gonna have to go through at least 2 budget scenarios, right? There's an override scenario and an override scenario. Just the timing dictates that we have to go through both of those budgets, which means that all of the department heads and the schools, they're gonna have to do multiple budgets. We're in a year too that probably more than any year, at least recently, certainly since 2014, we have to be in a situation where we go into town meeting as a unified town. We've got to be in that situation to get to where we're at today, because I still have a lot of questions after Tuesday's meeting. You know, I think we all had a million questions, right? There's a lot of uncertainty with all of it right now, because we don't even have agreement that we're gonna propose an override, and Tim's put a bunch of options on the table for the select board to think about, but they haven't had those discussions, they haven't made any decisions yet. But we've got to get to a point where we get from here to there, where we're all going into town meeting with the same message, with a strong message to the town as to what our recommendations are, to prepare the voters and have a high level of confidence in the recommendations that are being put together, the work that went into those recommendations and whatnot. So I also watched Mark's meeting. I kind of ripped off his idea a little bit. I've had some concerns based on the meeting last Tuesday and how the budget process has been developing. So I reached out to Jen Thomas, and I asked her to meet to talk about how we get through this, how we align the select board with finance committee to try to open up that line of communication. It has been challenging in the past, but I think more than anything this year, that's what's going to help both the select board and the finance committee get that level of confidence within the town, with the taxpayers and voters, and be comfortable with the budget process, I guess, that everybody is participating in the way that they need to, and in the end, that we have a result that's a good result for the town. So,
And what did Jen say?
So we had a very good discussion. We exchanged a bunch of ideas. I brought up the idea of putting together a working group similar to what Mark had. And the idea behind the working group was, the way that things have kind of developed so far is Tim basically put together his high-level preliminary budget, which was a level service budget. The money that was left over in the available budget was kind of the number that Jay used, which is how we ended up with the scenario where the schools have 40 positions that they're planning on cutting if we
Right.
don't get an override. That's not a good position for the town to be in right now, as we kind of have talked about. So I brought up the idea that we would look at the whole budget with a small working group and determine, similar to what Groton has done, what is our no override scenario? What does that budget look like? Because it's going to be a lot of work to do that. So, and then I brought the school committee in, so I asked Laura to the next meeting, and nothing is agreed yet. There's no sort of structure for it, but in principle, I think, we have a good idea. They're going to go talk to their respective boards and committees about getting that together, and the idea is that, we can work through that scenario together with town administration and the school department to come up with a scenario that's a realistic scenario that doesn't all fall on the school side in terms of the service level reductions that will be necessary if we have an override scenario. So.
And I think the finance committee needs to work with the select board in having Tim develop 2 budget scenarios. And with that 800,000 split between both the town side and, the other rest of the departments and the school department. And I'd like to see what that would look like if he had to cut $400,000 from the budget if we don't get an override. I'd really like to see that, because I don't think people understand how really there's not a lot of meat in this budget for the other departments. The departments have really been cutting and cutting, and they're getting slimmer and slimmer. So I'd like to see that. I really would like to see him make 2 scenarios. One, like the school department did with their 3.9 or whatever it was, and then with a 5.9. I'd like to see him make his budget scenario with the half of that $800,000 deficit and then what it would look like. The other,
So-
so I'd really like to see those two scenarios, and I'm not sure why we couldn't work to get that done.
I'd agree with that. I don't know about splitting it half and half. I don't know if that's the right formula necessary for Grafton, but I think that working group would basically get together and talk about that. My thinking was that we wouldn't necessarily have something in mind in terms of an even split. But that really we would go through and try to figure out, my kind of discussion with Jen was along the lines of, look, if we don't get an override this year, we're likely to go for an override next year, because that's just what the numbers are, that's what they're dictating, that we're gonna need an override at some point. We wanna get through, if we have a no override scenario this year, we wanna get through to minimize layoffs, to minimize the, that drop in service in all areas. And so really, we want to be going through each of the departments and looking at what are the small things that we can do that will add up to the big number, to try to minimize as much as possible those service reductions in all areas. And so I don't know if that process benefits by saying we're gonna split town side and school side. I think, you just go into it with, let's look at everything, let's put it all on the table.
So why can't we have a third scenario and do that?
And everybody give a little.
Well, the thing in Groton is we worked over the summer that led to that scenario of 50-50.
Right.
So if we do the same thing here, it may be 60-40, who knows what it could be, right?
Yep.
So you have to go through that process. So in this working group that you're talking about similar, we did one member to FinCom, one member of the school committee, one member of the select board, and so on and so forth, like that?
Yeah.
Is that the thought process?
I was thinking smaller is better, because
Smaller is better.
because there's a lot of work to do, and it has to happen quickly. So
Very
it's
quickly.
meeting, scheduling, logistics is gonna be challenging.
So the smaller the group, the better the
I
chances.
think the smaller the better.
I'd like to, you looking for a volunteer from
I
our group?
am.
I don't have a
So
problem
can you
being
just put
that.
your hand up? If it's gonna be anything other than a single member, I'll just let you kind of run with that, if that's all right.
That's fine.
Can I ask, I would really like to see three scenarios, though. I mean, I'd like to see what it would look like 50-50. I mean, it's gonna be a really drastic thing for the other town departments. But I'd like to see that scenario, because this is the reality we need to present to the townspeople. We have 800,000, you can't expect the school department to take all of it. So let's see what happens if they took 50, half, if we did half and half. What would it look like if the other departments took 40% of that? I mean, we need different scenarios, and so they could see different cuts and services that were going to be limited to them.
So can I offer one other potential option? I get what you're saying. The way that I was thinking about it is maybe you would just do it proportionally. So the schools get, what is it, 60%?
Yep.
So you would do proportional to your proportion of the overall budget. It doesn't seem fair to me to take somebody who's got 40% of the budget and ask them for 50% of the cuts.
And that's what we did in Groton.
If you're gonna do something arbitrary, I think a better foundation to do that on would be your proportion of the budget as a starting position.
Can we also include to remove the marijuana money so that we're not making more cuts in October? If we're gonna be seeing these hypotheticals, and it's not really 800,000 at that point, now it's 1.2, right? Or does the marijuana money include the 800,000?
No, the 800,000 says we're gonna get the 360,000.
Right, so.
However, the state aid number is $200,000
Nothing wrong
higher.
with the UPS.
So I'd say the actual
No.
deficit's probably
No.
closer to 1 million based on that. Yeah.
Which is great,
We
but
should have
I
accurate
wanna
numbers.
make sure.
We should
yeah,
have, I
yeah.
agree with you 100%.
Including the marijuana money also violates our policy, by the way.
It does. I was gonna point that out. It's a very good point.
So I think what we could do is we could ask that working group determine service cuts up to $1 million. And then if they need to go up to $1 million, then we'll have that plan put together.
Yep.
So again, it's not something that's agreed or organized yet or whatever, but I'll just have Jen Thomas reach out to you and
Sure.
I
go
think
get it
we have,
organized.
as the finance committee, they'll kind of have to agree. If we want to go proportionally, I don't have a problem with that, if you want to do it that way. But I think we need to come in unified and say to the select board, this is how we'd like this is what we'd like to look at, and how we'd like to look at it, because they aren't gonna have an idea of how to do that.
Sure, I would recommend we would do it proportionally.
And if they're gonna keep marijuana money and put it on just the municipal side.
I don't think the marijuana money should even be part of the,
I
The
agree.
nego-
Dan brought up a very, very good point. Our financial policies say you
No.
don't count on revenues that aren't gonna be there. They have to be
that don't
recurring.
exist, that aren't.
When we had a situation in Groton, you'll see in there, where we put in a hotel tax at 3%. And I, in the first year, refused to count it in my revenue projections because I didn't know what it was gonna be. So we got the first year, went to free cash, it was awesome. And then now we know what we can expect and we can make an educated guess what it's gonna be. So you have to be very careful how you count on new revenues. I'm hoping that 360,000 is the least amount we get. And it's more like 500,000 when these two shops, pot shops, get up and running, so. But until they're up and running, you don't know what it's gonna be.
It's just a wish.
But
It is, you
it
know.
could be reality, but
It
I don't
could
think
be,
it's gonna
but
be a reality in 21.
Not soon.
Yeah.
Not soon.
What happened with UPS?
Well, we know that the application is in for the
Yep.
ones up there,
Which is great.
and they haven't come to the planning board yet for a special permit, so they're still lagging way behind, and it's not going to be ready by July 1st.
So does the committee want me to draft a letter of concern to the select board? That's what I would suggest.
I think so.
Yes,
Let's just register our concern and the reasoning behind it. I agree with that completely. And I think once you do get the money, the community host agreement is a 5-year agreement. Personally, I wouldn't use that money for operational needs because that money's gonna go away after 5 years. There's no,
no, you can use it for capital needs, though.
yeah, well,
One time.
yep, you can use it for lots of things, but I
Right.
wouldn't use it for operational
No, absolutely
needs.
not.
Right, so I would suggest that might be a great opportunity to actually put a down payment on OPEB. You just stuff all that money into the OPEB account, and now you have a really good down payment on it. And it happens for 5 years, you've put a couple million, $3 million in it, that's substantial, it's a starting point.
Yep.
What do you have in your financial policy for OPEB?
Well, what we did is we put a policy together where we would put enough money in the trust each year so that the net present value doesn't increase. So our liability right now is $7 million. And our actuary told us that if we put in $177,000 a year, plus growth, maybe 2% each year, into the trust, we're not gonna knock it down, but it's not going to grow greater than 7 million. So that's, and then what we said is when our unfunded pension liability is paid off in 2035, we would take that entire unfunded pension of $1.3 million that we're spending now, and that would go, and that would fund OPEB at that time. So it would just continue.
Yep.
And Wall Street liked that plan. Wall Street liked that plan. So
Okay,
you'll see in my budget, I have 177,000 out of free cash to go into the OPEB trust.
And we might want to include that in our financial policy
I think I sent you a copy of our financial policies. It's in there
for OPEB.
for OPEB.
I think we need to make some statement about it in our financial policy, have a plan.
And we can't keep kicking the can down the road.
Well, we've been doing that for a long time, I know. So, I know, it's
Let me rephrase
unfortunate.
that. We shouldn't keep
No, we
kicking the
shouldn't do
can
it.
down the
No.
road.
Okay.
Well, are you suggesting that we amend the current policy to add something in there?
I would, because it's there, it's going to, we're gonna have to deal with it sooner or later, so we might as well put it in our financial policy and see if we can get the ball rolling in some direction with some amount of money anyway. I mean, we've got a big gap, worth 45 to 50 million.
So are you volunteering to amend the policy with some new language?
Sure, I can do that.
All right,
You wanna do the
I'm happy to work with you on that, but
debt policy or financial policy?
I think it would be part of the financial policy, I would guess.
Just the financial policy,
Yeah.
okay.
Then I'm gonna hold off until we have that amendment, sending this along to the select board, if that's all right.
Yeah,
I agree.
because the you know what you might do, though? You might want to send copies to the select board. I don't know if they've even read these policies, at least the new members haven't.
Yeah, there's 3 new members, so I doubt they have.
Has Peter seen them? I know Ed
I don't
knows
think,
about
I
them.
don't think Peter has.
That's a real young board, isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, they can read, they,
New.
they should probably read them so that they know what we're dealing with now. And then, I mean, there's no hurry to get the review done, and I can work on the amendment. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, so.
I guess my thinking is that they're busy,
Yep.
and if we're gonna ask them to review and sign something, we should give them something that's ready to review and sign, rather than something that is gonna be amended and then,
I agree with you.
so, that's my thinking.
I like it.
It's just that they're working on the budget, and they should know the financial policies. Just saying. But I'll get it ready and done as soon as I
Okay,
can.
I tell you what, I'll do this, I will send them, copies of the policy and just let them know that we'll
Yeah,
have
and
amended
just let them know
policies
we're,
for
yeah.
them, but they'll be substantially similar, we'll just
Yep.
adding
We're
something
just
for
adding one
OPEB.
thing, yep,
Fine
got
with
it.
that. Okay, what else do we got here? We have,
CPIC.
CIPC, so Colleen and I met with the select board in December. I've been talking a lot, so I'm gonna let you talk for a little.
Not really good at talking.
Madam Chair?
I think it went surprisingly well. They didn't dissolve us, so CIPC lives, and I think they're gonna take our charge back and look at it, and, you know, we gave them a draft charge of what we would like to see, and we haven't heard back from that yet. But we gave examples of what we could be doing, and they seemed receptive to that. So I think,
I watched the meeting, it went very, very well. There seemed to be support to work with you and to keep the committee going, so it was a positive outcome. It was a positive meeting.
I thought it was good. And,
I agree.
Obviously, we have gotten some thinking going around capital, because somehow it ended up in
Which
one of
was
the proposals.
great progress,
for
yeah.
override, which I think I'm in huge support of.
Who did you meet with?
this
The whole board.
The whole board?
yep, both boards met.
Okay.
Or committee and board. But yeah, I left there really excited and hopeful that we're gonna be able to pull it together, and, you know, Becca sent me a bunch of information to start going through, and, yeah, so this year, we're not going to come up with any plan. We're not approving anything, not looking at anything, because we're trying to start looking at 5 years going forward. We told them that it's just not enough time to be given something in February to make any
Right.
impactful.
Right.
So that's where CIPC is now, trying to get back together, I guess, and figure it
So
out.
are we gonna have a warrant article for May?
Yeah, we'll have a warrant article, but essentially it'll be not reviewed by CIPC. So, you know, in the past 3 years, we've essentially gotten a list from Tim with, you know, fairly minimal information in terms of the background detail and whatnot. And it's, you know, they've asked for just an up and down vote. So we're not gonna do that this year. We're gonna basically spend that time working on the 5-year plan and looking at different scenarios. And I think, you know, as we talk about the potential for an override that includes capital, it would help a lot if there actually was a plan to say, if we're gonna raise your taxes and we're gonna be collecting another $1 million a year, whatever the number is, for capital, here's what we're actually planning on delivering over the next 5 years, and people can actually see what that actual, you know, what's that tax money is gonna deliver in the way of capital and infrastructure. So, similar to the roads, you know, I think that was part of what was successful in 2014, is they said, here's the roads program that we have. Here's how the, you know, pavement condition index is gonna improve over time, and,
It's been really successful.
if we don't do this, we
They
made some
had
comment.
5 years of the roads they wanted to do for the first 5 or 10 years, I think.
That's right.
They listed the roads, so.
So it was kind of it was a more specific
Yes.
plan, and I think, you know, if we're proposing an override for capital, we probably want something similar. So that's gonna be the focus, I think, of CIPC. I thought it was a good
Good.
meeting,
I'm excited.
so,
That what they are proposing the override before?
Are they what?
Is that what they're proposing the override before capital?
I think so, aren't they proposing the override before capital?
there are
Focusing on?
there are different scenarios. So there's actually, there's no override. There's an override with capital, and the kind of Tim's number that he put on it was $1 million a year for capital. And then there's a capital plus school and town, which is essentially keeping the town and town side and school side level service. He had a list of positions that would be added on the town side, which it would fill out the fire department. There was an engineer to take some of the cost for engineering services that we outsource and insource those. So there's a number of different positions. There's what were some of the other
Recreation
ones?
director or something.
Recreation director, yeah. So there was a number of positions that he looked at, adding over a number of years, so.
And why,
Did somebody save a copy of that document that we can give to Heather so she
Yes, I
has?
missed that.
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
why are you wanting to change the capital expenditure amount from 10 to 25?
So, in looking at most of the towns around us, in fact, most of the towns in Massachusetts, their kind of threshold for capital is 25,000, and ours is 10,000. So,
The DLS has it listed as 25,000 too in their manual, and when you're coming up with a capital planning program. So we just kind of thought we would think about that.
Does it fit for our town, though?
well, so we talked about the effect in Grafton, and what ends up happening is because you have a lower threshold, more ends up included. Tim said that years ago, Finance Committee preferred that because then they had a more comprehensive list, I guess, of things to look at.
But are these departments able to fund, if it's something is between 10 and 25,000, can they actually fund it out of their current budgets?
It's happening already.
Is it?
Yep. We have little pockets of capital, so if you think about it, 10,000 might have been appropriate years ago. Obviously with inflation and the cost of everything going up.
Well, I think some departments are doing their capital, but it isn't always 10,000. It's probably below that. And they're, have their capital in their budget. But,
Yep.
so,
it was a
Good progress.
point of discussion, I guess.
Sounds a lot better than this conversation we had, the same conversation last year at this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Good. Congratulations. Nice job.
So our debt policy mentions 10,000, but we want to update that as well.
We did update that. Matt and I went through it, and you and I did that last summer, didn't we?
We reviewed it, I didn't have any updates on it.
Yeah.
Well, but
we did update it to 25,000, though.
Oh, I see.
Was that something that Finance Committee actually wants to, I would say that we probably want to talk to Tim and the town accountants about the impact of doing that, because it would change the budget process, and maybe it would be something that we would amend to prepare for next year's budget, if that's the recommendation. But if we have a recommendation for 25 grand, that's probably the time to do it, is between this budget year and next year.
Yeah, I'd really like to know what the impact is going to be for the departments, though, if you go to 25,000.
Okay.
I'd rather get more information from them if what would happen.
Okay. So do you want, I can just send a quick note over to Tim and the accounting department to just ask for an opinion on that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm happy to do that. All right, so, what else do we have? Shared Services Committee, so Sue and I have been in correspondence with Becca. She doesn't have much more information than you do, other
I don't-
than
I think
it
it's
hasn't met,
defunct.
it's not current. I think we
It was established when we were looking at shared services with the school department. And then it kind of went out to, can we use a regional dispatch person for the police department? And then it just kind of went down the hill. So, but they haven't met in a long, long time. It's defunct as far as I know.
So let's
So-
just remove that from our discussions,
Yeah.
and if it reconstitutes, we can always reappoint somebody
Yeah.
as a subcommittee member, and
Like a plan
we'll
to
go
me.
from there. Okay.
Interesting.
Let's see, so what else do we have? We have DPW?
DPW is coming along fine. The windows are in this week. they're in the administrative room, they're finishing up the walls and the painting and the ceilings, so that should be completed. So the interior work is really going well. And the ductwork had a little bit of a slow start, but it's all in now and it's in good shape and it's working, so. And the only little issue we still have are the wash bay floors and where the garage, the trucks are stored. Some of them, the floor is a little uneven, so they're gonna have to grind that down, but it looks like it's going to be not a problem to do that, and they're gonna get that done. We should have our substantial completion by the end of March, and then the punch list will start, and then everything will be complete by the end of May, so.
That's great.
We're doing really well, and it looks good, and.
It does, I drove by there the other day, it looks really nice.
Yeah, it's really, it's gonna be a nice building, so,
The board seemed happy, I guess they did a tour yesterday morning, they talked about it
Yeah.
last night. Yeah.
yep, so, it's a long, long haul, but once it started, it was doing pretty well, so. But the colors have been picked out, they're working, Andy is working with Becca, because we're going to buy the equipment ourselves. And by talking to the vendors, and really explaining to them specifically what's needed and how it's going to function, it looks like we're gonna get a little bit better deal cost-wise on some of this equipment, so hopefully that stays that way, because what's his name gave us, the construction company gave us, they really jacked up the cost for all that equipment. So we're gonna be purchasing it ourselves, but it looks like we're gonna get some pretty good deals on it. And the only change order they had at the select board meeting is because of the pump, that gas that was put in, because that was added, the gas tank, that was added late into the project. And so that change order was done, but it didn't, we had the money for it, so it came in a little bit less than we had hoped. So that's good. So things are going along well, it's happening,
Looks good.
so,
Does DPW anticipate adding staff?
no. No, and they did estimate when we were going through, there's a little formula that they use for utilities, for heat and lights and everything else, and they ran that, and I think they said that might increase their budget by maybe 40,000. So.
Building, of course it's gonna.
Yeah, it's a bigger building, so it might increase the budget by 40 or 45,000, but,
You get a good
no
handle on it next
staffing,
year.
no staffing increases, maybe down the road in 3 or 4 years, but right at this point, we're not anticipating anything in the next 2 or 3 years, so. There's always seasonal work that comes and goes, but otherwise, nothing permanent. So, looks big, it looks good.
That's the perfect segue into EDC, because their big focus at the moment is on redeveloping the old DPW site. Did anyone go, Dan, I think I saw you at the meeting last
I was in.
Thursday night? Was it?
Gateway to Grafton?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
so the big focus is, okay, we've got this 4 acres of land, very odd shape, borders wetlands, surrounds a post office, what do we do with it? And trying to get community input, and of course, there's some people who wanna turn it into a park, other people think it would make great senior housing, some people would like to see a mixed-use, kind of retail type thing, but that ship's kind of sailed, they're not so sure, but not so much the retail as offices. So,
This happens to be here.
there we go, okay.
I think
Lots of dots.
yeah, I know David went to that, but to me, mixed use makes more sense.
Yeah, so I
And it
went,
brings
my
in
husband and I
revenue.
went, and,
Is the other the teen center? They made them add teen center.
Oh, that's come back.
by the time they were done, I was kind of convinced that, senior housing, not, town-owned senior housing, but, privately run senior housing would probably be a good option. Because it's walking distance to amenities, doesn't tax the schools. So anyway, the idea is to try and sell the land, like, again, it has to be voted on, but a lot of people seem to prefer the idea of selling it, so it gets developed and tax revenue comes in, versus hanging on to it and therefore having to maintain it, you know, even at a most basic level. We'll see what happens.
Passes.
But
that's what
we're
we
getting
need,
people
more
to tell
seniors.
us what the ideas are, and we'll see what happens. So the big push is to try and decide what to do with this property. The other things going on with EDC, the update on the Shop Grafton Mass, another successful year. Virtually all of the vendors in town said, yep, sales were up. Now, no one's claiming that that was because of Shop Grafton, but it didn't hurt. Everyone feels good about it. So if nothing else, when you have a climate that is perceived as friendly to business, at least on some levels, doesn't hurt. But, okay, you had a question, are you still stretching? So that worked very well. He's gonna do his business plan seminar again. When he ran it last year, he had like 30 people. Gonna run it again, something people like, definitely useful. Would be happy if people decide to open businesses in Grafton. And they did do a, you know, they keep looking to try and improve parking at the MBTA. How can we squeeze out some more spots? And, you know, where can we put additional spots? And as they look to develop 8 Pine Street, discussions about how we can encourage whoever eventually develops there to maybe create some parking there for, you know, people taking the T, because we need more parking right now. It's very popular, that's a good thing. But the MBTA is not going to do anything. They are not, you know, they're not interested. They've got as much parking as they want, and, so
They
we're
don't
kind
have
of
the
on our
money
own.
either, so.
I'm sorry, what?
They don't have the
They got
money
more
either.
infrastructure
Yeah, well,
problems
that
in
too.
Boston to deal
Yeah.
with.
But there are
true.
possibilities, you know, and this is one of the things John will do, is, you know, can we get grant money to create more parking for ourselves? You know, parking that we would own. So that's being looked at. So again, it's ongoing, we're just constantly, but there's nothing.
He's done a lot
imminent.
in the year and a half he's been here. Bless you, bless you.
I think so, and it's not, you know, we don't have a big sexy project that we can say, oh yeah, look, John brought this in, but what he has done is 2 things. Number 1, created an environment in town that is definitely more appears perception, which is reality, you know, more business friendly. Hey, we like our businesses, we wanna do things for them, we wanna help them. And you know what, each one of them's little, but they all add up. You know, so you know, it's nice to have 20, 30, 40 small businesses doing well in your town. And the other thing is, he's made us more visible.
Yep.
Because that's the only thing he does. He's not trying to sneak it in, not, I shouldn't say sneak it in, but add it in to 20 other things on his schedule. His mission is, go to these conferences, present Grafton, make these brochures, hand them out, talk to people, be on the phone, you know, specifically for getting people to come in. He's been successful. They had apparently quite a crowd come in and look at Pine Street, the 8 Pine Street lot. So that's what EDC is doing. They're definitely trying to, you know, really push, and I'm sure, you know, once, the other thing that's come up is Wyman Gordon is gonna be selling off a
That front
portion of their
portion,
land. And so we're definitely very interested to see what happens with that. So,
How's the library construction going?
now that's my next one. So next
Can I ask you
library,
about,
We do
John,
have a new town planner, by the way.
Irene?
Oh, I saw that last night,
Yeah.
Can I ask you about the EDC?
I'm
Is there
sorry?
any, the EDC?
Yep.
John Allen was a 2-year experiment. Do we know if that experiment's gonna continue on?
well, actually, it was a 1-year experiment, and they were happy enough that they continued it for the second year. Kind of the next hurdle, there's 2 hurdles. One of them is to try to get him into the operating budget versus funding him out of free cash. And then he has indicated that he would be willing, you know, to entertain the idea of being full-time.
Right.
So I thought this currently is his 3rd year, and he was in the operating budget for his 2nd year and then moved out. I thought that's what happened.
I'll have to double check.
Or am I
He was in the budget the first year,
Yeah,
free cash the second
Yeah.
year. What's he doing this year?
I think he's still free cash.
I think it's still free cash.
Well, that's not good. We gotta get that in the operating budget.
So anyway, but that's,
Because when you
that's
see
what's
Tim's
happening.
thing, that's one of the things he wanted
He
to
wants
put
to
into
back
his
in,
budget.
yeah.
And the old central fire station. Is there any chatter about?
That is not on any, I shouldn't say that. That's not currently on EDC's,
Okay,
I don't wanna say it's not on their radar,
there
but
was
it's
a
not on
committee,
their
isn't there?
agenda, cause they really have no control over it. If the town was to step up and say, you know what, we got it, we cleared it out, whatever's in there, we sent it off somewhere else, and now we're looking for ideas, now EDC's gonna get involved. But until then,
Right.
no
You mean
sense
where the
talking
school
about it,
department
'cause-
stores?
Yes.
Are you
we have
talking about
no-
that?
We have no control.
Where in the world would the school department put all that stuff?
Oh,
Well,
they
the
didn't,
only
I'm
reason I
saying,
asked that-
until that
Not cleared
happens,
out, she's saying.
we're not talking about it because,
Yeah,
Not
makes
a,
sense.
not an EDC
Right.
issue right now.
No, it,
But to answer your question, that came up a couple of years ago, and the idea was, we need more parking around the common. Knock down that old, and they put all sorts of adjectives on the building. Fully functional, good location. They were gonna knock down and put up a parking lot. And then that went away.
Not enough room.
well, one thing that did come up, I'd forgotten about this, is at the site of the old Grafton High School, which is now just pretty open space. Could we put some parking there? In other words, nobody wants to turn the whole thing into a parking lot, but what if we, kind of like they did at the Eckbow Landing, what if we paved just one rectangle and put, let's say, 10 spots in there? So that was discussed as a possibility. And again, you don't need it all the time, but definitely in the summer for the concerts, maybe during the winter for the Grafton holidays. So that idea was brought up. And again, that's just kind of a wish list thing, so to speak. Is it going to, is someone gonna build a business because we put 10 more parking spaces in? No. You know,
I mean, they could put a
but-
lot more parking spaces in, like a lot of towns do, and then they park the car and then go walk up to the common to do their shopping.
right, and that's what they're
So
trying to do.
10 more
so-
spaces isn't gonna cut it. They're gonna have to look at more
Well,
than
it's
that, I
at
think.
least it's a start.
I know.
You know, because nobody wants to drive up, Worcester Road, or what, 140 there, and there's a parking lot, visible right from the road. It's ugly. So again, that was as far as we got.
I know, we could put a super park there.
I
where
actually would
originally
have
was.
put super
That's
Let's
park
get to
was
the library,
originally.
I got an early
All
morning
right, what
tomorrow, and I
about
wanna
the
go to the
library?
library.
Library Planning and Building Committee, as with the DPW, moving along nicely. One or two minor things, had to dig deeper than they wanted for some soil, wasn't testing right, so had to keep digging until they finally got what they wanted. But not horribly, not like, oh my God, this is terrible, just, more than they wanted. If you haven't already, if you email Andy, you can get on the mailing list and you'll get a daily update with pictures of what's happening. Currently, we're still in demolition mode for the things that are going to be, ripped apart and rebuilt. But everything's looking good. Contractors are all doing what they should. Everyone's happy so far. We've got experienced contractors. Everyone's feeling good about how it's
Busy site.
progressing. So.
Can't
Awesome.
wait.
Yeah, so I'm excited, it's, we just keep, but it's, again, now we're in a just like we were in a holding pattern a year ago, waiting to get the final documents to go to bid, now we're in this kind of holding pattern until they actually start building.
Are we moving up the list?
As far as I know,
Would that
that hasn't even come up, in our discussions recently.
That old DPW site is actually 4 acres?
I think so, or 2.8 suddenly jumped in my head, so it's somewhere between 2.8 and 4.
That includes
Like a parking
what, the
lot there.
tire barn, they call it?
And yeah, there's some little building off to the left there, that's all part of
The
it.
highway department stores things in,
Okay.
but,
And dead
um,
animals.
there's a lot of wetlands.
Yeah, the only thing that's not included is that one house that got rebuilt after the fire, and then the post office. And in fact, the funny thing is, somebody asked, do we even know who owns the land that the post office is on? And the answer at the time was, oh, no, we don't, we have no idea who owns it. So if somebody does, they're leasing it from somebody, but off the top of their heads, nobody could say who that
Oh,
was.
well, how about that?
I'm sure it's some title assurance company out there
Knows.
knows exactly who owns. it.
Well,
All right.
you
Do we have
guys
anything
all
else?
went To the theater in Westboro, right?
Is there any discussion about either of the meetings that we had, either with the Finance Committee or Select Board in December, January?
Want more of them. That's it.
Yeah,
Let's
we
keep
just
talking.
need more
We
information.
need more-
'cause
we
it
need
didn't-
more
I
meetings.
followed up with Dr. Cummings and Tim, I asked them a couple of questions, and you've got them in
Yeah.
your thingy there.
Thank you, Barry.
You can't transfer CPC money to override.
Well, okay, if they said, gee, making the common pretty or taking care of ADA issues to help people with disabilities, what's more important? should I make the common really look good, or should I help people who need crutches and, you know, have a hard time getting around? And we know it's gonna come. We know the ADA compliant issue is going to
Yep.
pop up, and initially they said it would be about $1.5 million, and about $1 million of it would go to recreational sites, which the community preservation money could go to. So I just asked if they would, if they had considered it, and Tim said no, they'd have to do some changes, and not yet, anyway. So,
I do have a question.
Sure.
If a special election is really on the agenda, how far in advance do we have to, is that 45 days?
The
that we have to
select
know?
board has to notify the town clerk of the election within 30 days of the date of the election, I believe. I believe it's 30 days. I can double check that.
And to ease the school, it was thought to maybe do it by end of March, early April. Is that everyone's recollection on
That's what we
that?
talked about. I think I
See, I
suggested
don't know
that.
how that
Right.
eases the school.
But that being said, is how urgent is it to try to get another TRICOM together after Tim presents his budget? Is that something that,
Well, what does, I'm happy to, I feel like I've opened a line of communication now with the select board that's been really positive. I've had a couple meetings with Jen, and she's been very collegial, she's been very collaborative.
That's good.
It's a very positive step forward as far as I'm concerned. I think our next steps, though, are to have the budget process with Tim.
And then the working group that you talked about earlier.
And then the working
That's right.
group, so the working group will essentially work with the budget holders on the no override scenario. Tim already has his preliminary budget. It's not final, but he'll be presenting that in a couple of weeks. Jay's done his, so we have those budgets together. So, yeah, at some point, I think once those two budget scenarios come together, then that would be the time where we would have another TRICOM meeting,
Okay.
right?
That makes sense.
We don't have, the select board hasn't, they haven't made a decision, and they're not going to make a decision on an override until at least they've had their budget presentation, I think, on
The 11th.
the 11th.
Right.
Okay.
So after that, I think that's when we
well, that's
April
what I thought,
timeframe would still
that's like 2 weeks of February, and then if we were gonna try to get something in April, we kind of, that window's really small, so I didn't know if like a Saturday is, if everybody's having difficult time scheduling meetings kind of a thing, if that's something we should consider too.
I just don't think you're gonna get it passed if you do it that quickly. If you do, if we're going for, I think you need, I mean, when we did the last one, we had a good chunk of time. I mean, it was a grassroots, like, we went door to door.
I was just gonna say that this is gonna especially from what I'm reading online,
Yeah.
this is going to be a knock on doors,
That's what we
sit
did last
down
time.
with people and house parties.
Yep,
Hey, get all your neighbors together, we'll come talk to
So
you.
maybe you're talking the May election.
it's gonna have to be,
Okay, so
mean,
special election's probably not.
I don't
going
think
to-
it's gonna work.
Last,
I just, yeah, and that was kind of what was discussed in the TRICOM meeting, is there is so much work to prepare the budget, all of the community education and outreach stuff, and town meeting itself. Like, there's a ton of logistics that go into putting together a town meeting.
Could I ask, can we get a capital plan too?
He's
For 5
required to
years?
submit the capital budget.
Well,
That
he
may-
does, but I want a 5-year plan if we're looking at an override of a $1 million. I want a plan. I'm just not gonna vote for $1 million and know what it's gonna,
You don't just
and
open
not
your
know what it's
checkbook,
gonna be spent on.
you don't just open your checkbook on faith?
No, I
Oh.
don't. Ask David.
That's odd.
I really do want a plan,
Yeah.
5-year
I mean,
plan.
they
But-
have
crack
to,
myself
that's
up
what he's
sometimes.
basing, if that's the road they're going down, that they're basing this override
Yep.
on capital, well, you need to say what you, it's just like the road, you need to have.
So
a
I'm
plan.
happy to pass that along, and that's one of my, I talked about that earlier. We do have to have a list of, hey,
Right.
here's the override amount
Yep.
that we want, whatever that amount is,
What
whether
we're
it's $1
using
million
it for.
Right.
or whatever. This is actually what's gonna be delivered for that $1 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanna see that plan too.
I mean, the community has to know what we're gonna spend
Yeah.
$1 million on every year for capital.
I mean, they drive the roads, they know what that was for, clearly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they're still not happy because some of them
Are
are
not
still
done
in
yet. Oh, I
horrible
know.
condition.
Christopher
Well,
Drive
mine
is
is
like you're going into a.
deteriorating faster
I know,
than
Christopher Drive, I feel like
our
I'm going into
Churchill
cabins.
Road is,
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I'm lucky the road I live on, it got done pretty early in this process and is in great shape, so. Like I said, just luck
So
of the
I'm
draw.
assuming that's his
so you
plan.
haven't met yet with Jen and Laura to set up another TRICOM meeting?
Because they're not ready for that.
They're not ready for it. There would be no point to setting up a meeting at this point, because we haven't, nothing's been decided.
Oh, we're really slow.
I get it. Look, I'm as,
I'm really, I
I'm
have
as
to
anxious
share,
as
I'm
anybody
really,
is.
I have to tell you, I'm really frustrated because
I was like,
I came in and he gave this presentation, we weren't allowed to ask questions. I didn't see any capital plan, I didn't see any five-year scenario, on his side of the thing, and yet he's asking for an override, and I'm sitting here going, I know nothing. How can I support an override when I don't have the information that
Whereas-
we need?
Whereas in Groton, they were starting their process in the summer
Yeah.
before their budget crisis year.
But everything was fine back in the summer.
All right, so I did express to Jen, because I know that a lot of finance committee members had questions on the back of the Tuesday meeting, and we just didn't have time to address those questions. I knew that, and I, you know, I made commentary to her to the effect that we need those questions answered, we need to go through the budget process, and that it felt a little bit cart before the horse. But she said that that was an intentional decision to get the override conversation started, and that Tim felt like he needed to put options on the table for discussion. So that's how his presentation on Tuesday came about, and that was his strategy, is to do some preliminary work, put some options on the table for the select board to discuss. And so I know, look, I'm anxious as anybody
Yeah,
is,
he
but
needs the meat behind the
And
options.
Tim needs to be a little bit more politically astute, and he's got to stop using inflammatory words. I
Well,
mean, when you
the
read
funny, the sad
Facebook,
part is, what he left out was three or four little words. DOR believes, you
like,
know.
when you read Facebook,
Oh, I
and I'm
know.
sitting here
Oh,
going,
my
all right,
God.
look,
They don't
I'm gonna stop this
understand.
conversation. I don't wanna be,
Yeah.
this year, we have to be collaborating
I
with
get
the other
that.
boards and committees, so
But-
it's not gonna be helpful
Yeah.
if we're disparaging our town administrator in the process, and I'm just gonna stop that conversation whenever I see it, so just know that that's gonna happen. If you wanna have those conversations in private, that's fine, and if you have some things for me to take to the town administrator, to the select board, I'm happy to do that. I'm trying to give us what we need to be comfortable going into
I
the budget process.
understand, and I wasn't being disparaging, I was criticizing the way he does things, and if it's,
I just wanna,
disparaging
I
to
wanna
you.
have productive conversations.
I
to try
support
to-
you, Mr. Chairman.
To try to get us
Second that
to,
emotion.
so let's just be collaborative, let's try to have that team mindset. As we
My
go into
my
it.
concern though is it's hard to get out there and try to defend the need for an override when there are needlessly condescending phrases being put out there
perceived condescending.
and put into a headline in the news that
That wasn't helpful, but I don't think it was the intention.
and it could
of
be
the
our
statement.
responsibility to try our best to explain that to people.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think that's what we need to do, but I understand your frustration 100%. I get that.
It's challenging.
It is
Look,
challenging.
I get it. We have work to do. We have a review process to go through with 2 budgets this year, which is gonna be really challenging.
We'll get it done.
We will get it done.
Yeah.
We have to, and I was trying to allude to this earlier, we have to get from where we're at right now to go in a town meeting feeling good about the budgets that we're presenting and the override options that we're presenting.
And
So
collaboration is the key.
Yeah.
It is, we have to work.
We have the right
with the
chairman
school
to lead
committee,
us.
We have to work with our select board,
Yeah.
we have to work with the town administrator.
I agree.
So it's
may
not
I
gonna
ask,
help anybody.
Barry, where are we with the commission?
Our Sustainability Commission,
Yeah.
we're meeting tomorrow night. I had a conference call with Ed and Amy on I'm sorry, I'm on there with him.
Yeah, I know.
Had a conference call with Amy and Ed on Monday. Ed has drafted and is gonna be presenting to us the benchmarking report. And now we're starting to meet with the department heads to put the report together. And we're gonna talk about that tomorrow night on who has what assignments.
Is that going to be available to be part of our discussion for the override?
I don't think we're gonna be ready for the override. We got started too late.
Okay.
And
Agree with
one-
that,
yeah.
Barry? Did we get started too late to impact the override? Yeah.
So one thing I want to add, and part of this is going to be part of the education we have to give people, because I want to clarify something I said towards the beginning of the meeting. And I've said this numerous times, we're the 91st largest school district by enrollment. And I'm just going to add to that, I was just today reading about and hearing on the news that so many districts in the state are losing students. Their enrollments, in some cases, particularly the smaller rural towns, are going down 49%. Ours is level, and likely to slightly increase if we get some of these larger developments that have been talked about, but at a minimum, they're staying level. That's pretty much a good thing, actually. When I said that we were the 87th in income, that's median income, just so you know. It's not income per capita. I'm not sure where we rank on that. But if you look at medium income, half households below, half households above, we are the 87th highest in the state for median. And the reason that's important is I have a feeling a lot of the people we're gonna talk to and a lot of the people that are, commenting and concerned, they're probably at that median or maybe slightly below it. I don't think we're having a lot of conversations with the people up here bringing that medium up. So that's why they're so upset by what do you mean I can afford this? I can't afford this. So, keep that in mind, but let people know, for better, for worse, demographically, this is what we look like. And the other thing, and I mentioned this, is when the state goes to figure out how much money they're gonna give us towards the schools, okay, they base it on two things. Your quote, ability to pay, which is determined by your total valuation, okay, property valuation, and by your income as reported, total income for all the residents in the town, as reported by DOR, Department of Revenue, okay? We are in the third decile, meaning that we are in the, not the top 10th, not the top 20th, but that next tier down, okay? So we're pretty close to the top again, a little bit out of kilter with 87th, highest for median. But we are a higher income town, and I think so many people, myself included, I've been here since 1994, I remember this as being a farming community. And I
Well-
recognize we're not anymore, but yeah, there have been so many changes in the last 25 years in the composition, of what this town looks like.
Yeah, Grafton's changed, it's continuing to change,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, you look at the housing stock that's being built now, and
High-end stuff.
they're pretty nice houses.
They're not building
Anything else?
1,200 square foot
That
living
is
houses.
all I had, I will.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded, we are adjourned.
All right.